Good afternoon, evening. We're going to start today with a workshop, and first item on the agenda is the request to install a creative crosswalk. Dave, Drew, and Melanie.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I've got Drew Justardens here with us and Melanie Tarian. They recently approached me about doing yet another creative crosswalk. As you recall, we have one over here at Simona's with we call a hot dog crosswalk and stuff, and we thought we'd do something along the lines that Drew does with his animals down on Adams Avenue, right there next to Lincoln Street, which is Lisbon Street, I'm sorry.
Pepperell Mill.
Yeah, by the Pepperell Mill, where Drew has his shop there. So I will remind the council that we only do these on local streets. We don't do them on state highways and stuff, and there's reasons for that, because we don't want to have to go through all the rules and regulations that the state requires and stuff. But Melanie came up and Drew came up with a design of something they'd like to see. We shared that with you as part of your package, and we're here to kind of listen to thoughts and suggestions that you might have. So,
Councilor Pettingill.
I think it's a fantastic idea. Big fan of turtles myself, so I'm super excited about that. As a big supporter of the arts and getting the arts into the public area, I'm super excited for this idea, and I can't wait for it to happen.
Stole my thunder, Zach. So, but yeah, no, it's. I thought, like the adage about slow but sure wins the race too. I'm always trying to remember about the turtle and the hare. So
if you come down to my center, you can actually see both of them living in a big pen together. You can
nice.
Kind of play with it.
It's a date.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, great. Thank you. Good luck.
So I know we have the hot dog crosswalk, as you mentioned, and we haven't seen any issues around safety
nope.
or any of those things.
Nope.
Okay.
It's actually worked out quite well. So
Great. Thanks.
Councilor Marcotte.
From what you just said about DOT, I assume that it's going to cross on Adams, right?
yes,
So it's just the one of the
just
four?
across Adams.
Four, if
Avenue.
there were four, but
Yeah, that's correct.
Sounds like you're good to go.
Okay. Good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Move forward with it, and thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Set the bar for every item tonight at 3 minutes. And I know Thorne is not going to be able to do that. So now we are seeing a presentation from Central Maine Power on the New England Clean Energy Connect project. Thorne,
and I
it's all you.
think we're going to project on the screen.
Intros first, if you could, for the council.
Okay. So thank you, Mayor Bouchard and Council President Cloutier, and all the other council members. I'm Thorne Dickinson. I'm the Vice President of Business Development. I'm also the project manager for CMP's NECEC project.
And I'm Jerry Mirabili. I'm the environmental permitting manager for the project, Central Maine Power Company.
Yeah, and we appreciate all of you giving us time today to talk about the NECEC project. We believe it's not only an important project for Lewiston and for Western Maine, but also for the state overall. And we see it as continuing the long relationship that CMP has had with Lewiston, and is another material investment associated with our opportunity here in the state. So I have a presentation that I'd like to share with you. We'll walk through the project and why we see the benefits associated with it. Just a little bit of a background associated with the project. It was Massachusetts legislation that was passed a little while ago that allowed for 9.45 terawatt hours of clean energy incremental to New England to be brought into the region. That, just to give you an idea of what 9.45 terawatt hours is, that's about enough energy to meet about 80% of Maine's load. So it's a significant amount of new clean energy into New England. It was a highly competitive process. There were 47 other projects that were submitted into the solicitation. We ended up winning after Northern Pass project was denied a key permit in New Hampshire. So we're extremely excited about the project, and it's 145 miles from Quebec down to Lewiston, obviously, in the southern terminus of the project. 2/3 of the right-of-way is along existing right-of-way, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we show some of the maps. And another 45 miles of it is on industrial forest and unorganized territories. The entire right-of-way is owned by CMP, and obviously, as you probably know, the new converter station, which is the single largest piece of the investment, is connecting into Lewiston, Maine, which is one of the strongest parts of the transmission system in all of New England. Just to give you a sense of progress that's been made on renewable energy, there's still a long way to go if people are concerned about climate change. There still is a lot of non-renewable energy in the mix in New England. So the bar chart on the left shows you that still 47% of our opportunities are met with natural gas, 31% with nuclear. The renewable piece is a much smaller piece of the overall total. That becomes compounded on the coldest days in the year when more expensive fossil generation has to come on board, and you see that 32% of the needs are met on the coldest days with actually oil. So the goal of Massachusetts was to see a bigger contribution in their region, in the New England region, by renewable energy. For us, and why we think part of the reason why our project was so successful in the evaluation was not only the cost and the bid that we put into the project, but also making sure that we dealt with siting correctly. And the first thing is making sure we get the site right, and we'll walk through a little bit of those things, but the basic imperative here was to avoid any impacts on communities, whether they're scenic resources or the environment. Also, individuals and communities. We acquired, as I said, the 51 additional miles that we acquired just over the last few years was from 4 landowners. Really, the bulk of it was just 2 logging land management companies. And then the other aspect of it was just being very open and engaging with the community, make sure that we're listening effectively. I think too often in the past, some transmission developers had more of a sense of arrogance around their ability to develop a project, particularly where they own the whole right-of-way, where we really tried to get out to the community and talk to them about some of the things that they were concerned about. And then be proactive from what we're hearing about. We spent a couple of years dealing with the areas that we thought were the most had the most impacts, the crossing of the gorge, the Appalachian Trail, Lake Moxie, those areas where we really transitioned from the existing right-of-way to the new corridor we bought. And we're excited, and we'll talk a little bit more about the agreement that we reached there. And then looking for those kind of opportunities where there are synergies and interests between everybody that can result in good long-term outcomes. So when we began thinking about this project, really back in 2013, we recognized that there was always a traditional corridor here. There's a transmission line that runs up through here. And that really dealt with CMP's past as being a owner of hydro plants. And you see those hydro plants in circles along the place and the transmission line there. Now we have to get to the border with Quebec, and in order to get to Hydro-Quebec. And the question was, how do we find the best access along the route to get there, with honoring the idea of trying to have the smallest impacts. So you start there by putting the Appalachian Trail there, you look at the conservation easements, and then you can lay over that some of the large landowners that are associated with there, and adding in the high peaks area, places where we want to make sure we avoid, and also some of the other areas along in the Greenville area, Moosehead Lake, and you end up with a kind of a slot in between those 2 protected areas where we found an opportunity, really just dealing with 2 large landowners to get all the way to the Quebec border. And when you look at those lands, you see an area that's heavily logged, which is really the goal. So we end up with, again, 2 pieces, one going from Lewiston up to the Forks that utilizes an existing right-of-way, and then a new corridor that's 45 miles through an area that is really industrial forest, an area that's commercially logged. And then even within that area, we were very careful in the way that we cited the project, and Jerry maybe can talk a little bit about, this is that new corridor that I talked about, the 45 miles from the Forks to the Quebec border.
Right. So the least impacts environmentally are always if you have a straight line. So we were looking to find the optimal route between the Quebec-Maine border in Beatty Township and the existing right-of-way. And so we started out with a straight line, but then we identified a number of resources that we wanted to avoid, whether they were protected natural resources under law or just areas that we wanted to avoid to minimize impacts. And what this shows is every jog in the line represents one or more resources that we attempted to avoid and routed it around them. So we've got an example of water bodies where it would have been a straight line if you see that circle, but there was a pond there, I think it's Atienne Pond, and a small conservation area around it, so we jogged around that. There's an area of wetlands to the east of that where the straight line route was delineated in terms of the wetlands within the 300-foot wide corridor, and determined that there were an awful lot of wetlands there, and we identified that if we moved to the north around that area, there were still some wetland impacts, but we minimized them by getting off route there. High elevations, Route 201, you may know, is a scenic byway, both a state and a national scenic byway. It's not a regulatory program per se, but there's a strong preference for protecting the viewshed of Route 201. And so in that area, what we did was to route the line between two mountains in sort of a valley between them, so that for the most part it's not visible from 201, and it protects the scenic attributes that make Route 201 a scenic byway. Another example, conservation lands. There's a cold stream conservation area that has a gap in it, and so it's hard to see at this scale, but you'll see that there's a small area where we didn't have to cross conservation lands because there was an area set aside that was not specifically conserved, and that's where we routed it through. Vernal pools are also amphibian breeding areas. They're highly valued by Maine DEP and by the Army Corps of Engineers, and they're regulated. And if you see a little angle in the line there, that was to avoid a vernal pool so that we didn't have to go over the pool and we didn't have to clear vegetation around the pool. And then the Kennebec River crossing, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. We have a couple of slides in a bit. Maybe we'll just talk about maybe just some of the overall impact summary first.
Right. So this is just a snapshot of the impacts of the project. This was made part of our Maine DEP and Army Corps of Engineers and Land Use Planning Commission applications, which are pending right now since last September. And briefly, the temporary wetland fill impact, almost 51 acres, is actually a mitigation, because we put down construction mats or crane mats to prevent damage to wetlands. So those are mats that go down to support heavy equipment that's moving through wetlands to get from the road or from point A to the structure installation site. Permanent wetland fill, it says 4.7 acres. Much of that was in the proposed converter station site, which is off of Merrill Road. And we've recently identified a new access road off of 202, an access route, rather than off of Merrill Road, that's going to cut the wetland fill impacts about in half. So that number's coming down. Forested wetland cover type conversion. So this is when a wetland is wooded or forested and it's converted to a shrub wetland on a permanent basis. And it's a conversion of type, but there's no loss of wetland functions or values. There's a shift of functions or values so that certain species are now favored, whereas previously other species were favored depending upon what their particular cover types are. So you might have different types of birds, different types of, all types of animals. And then the other impacts are very small in area.
So we talked about two of the areas that we thought we paid a lot of special attention to, and one was the Kennebec River crossing. Obviously, we know the meaningfulness associated with that river and what it represents for the state. We've publicly said, and to the DEP and the Public Utility Commission, the willingness to go underground. It is more expensive, and it has its own impacts associated with it. It's about $37 million. We have worked hard at designing a crossing, and particularly in working with some of the people in the region, to try to design an overhead crossing that we actually think has less impact. First of all, when you look at the map from an aerial shot, although the gorge itself, is as you get really down near the river, you see a lot of tree cover, but you can see a lot of clear cutting associated with the land around it. So what we've done, and you can see that from the green lines, is we put the poles far enough back on the banks of the crossing so you won't be able to see them from the river. In addition, we don't have to, because with the poles are up high enough on the sides, we're not going to have to clear all the way down. So if you were coming down on a raft or other way along the river, you looked up, you wouldn't see any cutting of the trees, and you wouldn't see the structures that are there. All you would see were the transmission lines coming over the crossing. And again, we've worked, I'll talk a little bit about that, with a mitigation plan with the region around that impact. And again, our belief is the less impactful, although we're willing to do either, is to go overhead. And then the other that we hear quite a bit of talk about, and is another area of particular concern, is where the Appalachian Trail currently crosses the corridor. So you can see from the north coming down to the southeast, our transmission, this is our existing transmission line. You can see an area that's cleared. It's about 150 feet that's cleared. The red line coming through is the Appalachian Trail. So if you follow it, you can see that it crosses kind of on a diagonal basis our corridor once, then it comes back down, crosses our corridor again a second time, and then the third time it kind of follows the corridor down for a period of time before it moves on and east. So what we'll be doing here is, this is the part of the project that's along an existing corridor. We'll be adding about 70 or 75 foot of additional clearance, putting an additional line parallel to the one that's there. And the conversation we're having both with the Appalachian Mountain Club and the trail, and both at the state level and at the national level, is the idea of acquiring land that would allow a relocation of the trail that actually would result in just one crossing, perpendicular to the right-of-way, with the idea of actually having less impact than currently is there. And that's the conversation that we're having with AMC and the trail. We have a couple of field visits actually that just happened recently. So we look forward to continuing that conversation. So I think both of those are examples. There's other ones that Jerry had mentioned where we tried to really thoughtfully plan out the route, how we planned this, and what the impacts were associated with it. A lot of questions around benefits. People want to know what are the benefits for Maine and what's in it for the state. So the first thing is that when you bring, and we're, as you guys know, we're injecting 1,200 megawatts into Lewiston, Maine at the converter station there. That it's equivalent to a 1,200 megawatt generator producing energy. What happens is the more expensive units that are currently setting the wholesale price for energy, the price you pay on the supply port of your CMP bill, that you're going to displace higher cost generation that's currently on the margin that's setting that price, whether it's oil or natural gas. And that results in a kind of a suppression in wholesale energy prices, particularly in Maine, but across all of New England and across the whole Northeast with this amount of energy. We estimate that benefit to be $40 to $45 million a year. This is a 40-year project associated with it, 20 years with the state of Massachusetts. When you combine that with other benefits that we'll talk about here, we're seeing about $23 million annually through higher gross domestic product for the state. We estimate 1,700 jobs during the planning and construction period. So from 2000, really ramping up now, but the average between now and 2022 will be 1,700 jobs. 18 million in annual property tax payments. Obviously, the biggest single investment of the project is the estimated 250 million associated with the converter station here in Lewiston. For those that have climate change on their area of concern, we'll be removing 3 million metric tons annually from CO2 emissions as a result of this incremental input into New England. And another piece that we've just announced associated with our agreement with the Western Mountains and River Corp was a commitment to bring broadband service along the corridor of the line, which will be a nice extension from the current area of broadband to an area where it currently doesn't. And all of that with no cost to Maine customers. So if Maine wanted to see these benefits and wanted to finance the project on their own, they'd have to pay for the transmission project plus the purchase power agreement with Hydro-Quebec, but that's all being paid for by Massachusetts. As far as milestones go, we signed a contract with Massachusetts Utilities on June 14th. That was a great milestone. Those are long contracts and complicated contracts. That deals with both the payment we get from Massachusetts customers for the transmission project and also that Hydro-Quebec gets for the purchase power agreement. And then most recently, I mentioned a couple of times, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Western Mountains and Rivers. It's a group that represents really the economic development and recreation interests of that region. Obviously, again, we recognize that the crossing the Kennebec River was one of the areas that needed to be carefully thought about. We also worked with them on the overhead design around the Kennebec River crossing and had a lot of conversations about lands that we would donate, trail locations, a visitor center around tourism, maintenance, education programs, and outdoor recreation. So going from here, the next steps, we signed the agreement, but now it needs to be passed on to the Massachusetts DPU, similar to the Maine Public Utility Commission. They'll review the contract to make sure it's fair and in customers' interest and follow the legislation. We're shooting for state permits by the year end 2018. We're hard at work there. ISO New England and federal approvals we're expecting by year end 2019, and that's when we expect to start construction with the commissioning at year end 22. So those are, any questions?
Councilor Wright?
Could you tell us the towns that are impacted by the Kennebec River crossing and the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, so, well, it's the Forks, the West Forks, and the trail itself, does that extend further south than the Forks? Is that?
The Appalachian Trail or the?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. I'd have to look at a map to know which towns it passes through.
I'm asking because I'm wondering if their councils have taken positions.
So we have letters of support from all the towns down the corridor. We have essentially 95% support, and I think it's actually in the, if you open up your map, I don't have that right here. Yeah, can I have that?
For those who don't have the map
Yes.
too, it might be helpful to
Yes,
I read the map, guys. Like
thank you.
the audience.
Yeah, so it would be the towns West Forks, Moxie Gore, and the Forks Plantation that are impacted. And essentially what we show here is that all the towns along the corridor have written letters of support around the project, except for New Sharon, although we're also have a meeting in New Sharon today. Hopefully you get a letter of support there. It's interesting, when we had those last conversations, we made the investment in time when we were one of 47 projects. And when we became more real by being selected, there has been more noise associated with the project. And so we're committed now to go back out to all the towns and we've been communicating all along, but to really make sure that we continue to listen to them and what's important for those communities.
Great, thanks.
Councilor Cloutier?
So before I make you too nervous, I'll just say that I plan on supporting the resolve. But it is your job, I think, to come here and sort of sell us on this. And so I'm interested in hearing from you what you've gotten for pushback thus far.
Sure.
Mostly, I think, more recently, like you said. And sort of what you're doing to sort of alleviate those concerns.
Sure. I think one overriding concern we're hearing from, particularly in the environmental area, is understanding whether Hydro-Quebec's hydro should really be considered incremental. The legislation in Massachusetts requires that it has to be incremental to New England. And because Quebec is a non-synchronous system with the U.S., any new transmission service into New England has to be through a line that's here, so like the line we're proposing. So I don't think anybody would question that this is incremental energy coming into New England, but Hydro-Quebec has committed to build new hydro over the last 10 years. Even in the last 5 years, they added about 1,500 megawatts of new capacity. And in the process of building that hydro and putting it online, really their goal was to make these kind of agreements with states that recognize the value of that clean energy. So they're not just going to receive a wholesale energy price associated with it. they're going to receive a price that also includes the environmental attributes associated with the energy. So in the meantime, while they're waiting for new transmission capacity to come online, and that hydro comes online, they will sell to other neighboring areas, whether it's into New York or Ontario or Eastern Canada. And I think somebody on the environmental side would say that's a good thing, because you're in those sales, you're reducing greenhouse gases in the interim until this transmission capacity is available. But when you look at it now, there would be an argument that saying, well, this transmission capacity is just connecting hydro resources that are currently being sold into other regions. But those other regions also have their own renewable portfolio standards. They have their own requirements to meet their own goals. So even if that were the case, then that energy that's now being brought into New England is going to have to be replaced in those markets from new renewable energy. So that would be one piece that I feel very confident that when people take the time to understand, we'll see this as incremental. And I think the other things that some of the people in the environmental community are wrestling with is should hydro, particularly reservoir hydro, which often requires some flooding of regions and some impacts to that local area, should that be considered a good renewable energy source? And particularly in Quebec, where you're very far north, where there's much of the vegetation is low shrub area. You don't get a lot of the kind of organic decomposition that happens. And the nature of the water, which is high in oxygen, has the way of reacting with the methane in order to have lower and lower emissions. So when you look at the life cycle emissions associated with this, you end up with emissions that are about same as onshore wind, but actually lower than solar, surprisingly, because of the manufacturing process with solar and some of the mining that goes with it, and obviously significantly lower than natural gas and coal. So I think that is one area. And then I think the other one is just the benefits, some of the things we talked about. One of the things we hear is, why should Maine host a transmission project when this is something that's going for Massachusetts? And what I try to describe is the fact that if you, again, I think I said it in my comments, if you want to build a project that all the benefits goes to Maine, then you would build the project we're building, because the main deposit of that energy is in Maine. Now, the other regions get the benefits, but the electrons that are flowing don't care that there was a financial agreement with Massachusetts to pay for them. So the first thing is that the power isn't flowing to Massachusetts, it's depositing here, it's benefiting the whole region. And then the benefits, I think, I walk through. So that's what we try to do, is we try to have I think these are important things for people to understand that care about this. I think it's an important decision for Maine. And I encourage people to get the facts, look at these things, look at these questions, and come to their own conclusion. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And just for everyone's benefit, there is a resolve on tonight's agenda that where the council will vote on whether to support the project.
Okay. We will now have an update on the nuisance party ordinance with its Officer Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, thanks for having me. So this is just a brief summary this past year at Bates College neighborhood, what's kind of identified as the Bates College neighborhood. In front of you are some of the numbers and also some numbers from previous years. Those aren't a reflection of to the 2017-18, of course. They were put in there just to see if there was a huge difference or not. Typically what we're looking at in terms of these numbers are College, Street, Davis, Elm, Fry, Nichols, Russell, Vale, White, and Wood. And before I get into just going over some of the simple numbers that I put together here at the end of the year, I just wanted to put some of the officer side of this in perspective for you. This year, a lot of things changed between the police department, our lines of communication with Bates, the way we work with Bates Security, and ultimately the nuisance party ordinance going into effect. I will say that I was responsible for following up with every single student that was charged. I also followed up with every single officer that responded to every single call in that neighborhood or on Bates campus proper throughout the entire school year. The feedback I got was phenomenal, not only from students, but also from our officers. The ordinance itself has allowed our officers more time to stay on the road and patrol. You know, if we're dealing with disorderly conduct charges or criminal charges, a lot of times our officers have to take the time to write an affidavit back at the station, processing an arrest, talking to bail commissioners. All these things are taking away from their time when they're actually on the street patrolling. The ordinance itself, being civil in nature, these officers issue the ticket for the violation of the nuisance party ordinance. They saw to it that the parties were disbanded, broken up, and everybody got home safely, and they could continue patrolling and doing what they're expected to do. Also, we found that the ordinance itself was effective in addressing the parties and the disturbances themselves when we got the calls to go to the scene. Officers would show up, they would identify the folks who were responsible for the party, they would issue them the ticket, and then give them a disorderly conduct warning. There wasn't a single occasion where we had to go back and essentially make an arrest after we had addressed it with the nuisance party ordinance. Also, as police officers, we were pleased that, you know, in issuing these tickets to these students, it wasn't a criminal charge that was going to go permanently on their record. It was the equivalent to a traffic ticket, civil in nature. So for the numbers for this year in 2017, and these numbers are reflective of the academic year, we had a total of 186 calls for service. The biggest jump I saw was actually under liquor laws, where in the previous year it was 15 calls for service. This year it went to 36. That can probably be attributed to what you would consider climate change for that neighborhood, an increased level of awareness, more calls to address the behavior, and also you know, essentially more police bodies in the area doing proactive enforcement as well. So at the end of the year, there were 49 total charges. Only 2 of them were criminal. That was a furnishing charge early on in the year. The majority of them were the nuisance party violation charges. There was 26 charges. And also there were 21 minors consuming or possessing alcohol charges. So of all, everything was civil in nature, and there was only 2 criminal charges on the year. No students were arrested for anything nuisance party disturbance related or alcohol related as you know, in this discussion for this ordinance. Other than that, that is kind of the wrap-up. I think that these numbers, this is just the initial year. I think this will be a little more revealing as we move on, you know, year 2, 3, 4 down the road, to see how, you know, we are comparing year to year, and if, you know, the message is being received on that end. I will say the neighborhood and the neighbors were extremely cooperative with us. Bates College administration and the dean's office worked well with us, along with their security. And we also had a lot of good feedback from the students themselves, who actually, typically when I would follow up with them to talk about what had happened on the previous evening or the previous weekend, a lot of them were very pleased not only with our response, but were very receptive to it. I think that was because of these open lines of communication we had with Bates, the early meetings we had with them. And so that being said, we've already started those meetings for next year. So the students are fully aware that, you know, there has been a shift in enforcement here. There is a higher level of awareness and attention paid to some of these problems in the area. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
So I can tell from your presentation, you consider the new ordinance as a success?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you recommend any adjustments to the ordinances or anything else that the council could do for you?
Mayor, currently, I wouldn't say there is anything more to add or take from it. I think it was extremely effective this year, and I also think that a few, maybe 2 or 3 more years will be very revealing in terms of, what maybe needs to be adjusted or not.
Okay, thank you. Council? Council Cloutier.
So first of all, thank you for your diligence and sort of all the follow-up. It sounds like it's a lot of work, and we certainly appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
And then secondly, just following up on the mayor's question, so it sounds like the program itself is successful, but in looking at the numbers, I don't see that reflected, and I'm just kind of wondering what you think the explanation is for that. Is it like that it's too soon? Is it that there's more reports, and so we're not kind of...
Well, that's the difficult thing about only having 1 year of,
Okay.
of data, so to speak, because this was the first year that it was in effect, and frankly, it wasn't even for the entire school year
Okay.
because it went into effect in November. So when we have 49 total charges, 26 of them being the nuisance party ordinance, it will be a little bit more revealing to see if next year, if there's more or if there's less, and how that message is being received. And also, I mean, frankly, 49 charges total, I don't look at that and say, whoa, that's a lot. As a matter of fact, I went a little bit further in looking at the numbers and dug a little deeper, and I want to say that it was just slightly over 25%, or 1 out of every 4 calls that we received that a student would be charged with, in this case, a civil violation. That's clearly just because of officer discretion, or, a call may have gone unfounded, but, so long as the call was warranted and the ticket warranted, that's when the charges were levied. But again, I think that after another 2 or 3 years, if there's a sharp decrease or increase in the numbers, that would absolutely be something to take a look at.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had a constituent ask recently, is there any sort of this tracking being done for the rest of the city in addition to this neighborhood?
Yeah, so the numbers I have here are strictly for the neighborhood. I would be glad to follow up with you on the rest of the
That'd
city.
be great, thank
Yep.
you.
What's the input you've had from the residents? I've anecdotally heard lots of good stuff. That's nice having our neighborhood back. It's nice being able to sleep at night and things like that, but what's been the input? And I know there's the public here, they may want to speak themselves, but what have you heard?
Yeah, so Councilor, just about everything I've heard has been positive in response. There's, initially, for lack of a better term, this kind of rollout, this initial year, there was some things to adjust to and some things that maybe in response that we want to improve on with Bates College security or how we handle certain situations. But overall, all the residents that I have spoken to, and a few in particular who have kind of taken the lead role in representing their neighborhoods, have had nothing but positive feedback.
Okay, just to that, we are running really early, so normally don't offer comment during workshops, but I know some of the neighbors are here, so if anyone did want to make some brief comments, we would definitely entertain that at this time.
Good evening. My name is Maureen Murphy. I live at 23 White Street, and I grew up on Davis Street. Since graduation, I have rushed and surveyed about 20 to 25 neighbors. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. Everybody is shocked at how well this last academic year went, as far as drastic reduction in disturbances. I think the ordinance has worked exactly the way it was designed, and I think due to Officer Charles Weaver's commitment to this process, and it's a process, we are off to a great start.
Thank you, Maura.
My name's Jay Allen. I own Six Sigma Properties. And I think what we just went through was great, and I appreciate all the effort from the police department. I would just encourage them, to put their heads together and figure out how to do the same thing in-town Lewiston. I understand that I'm not next to Bates College. I also understand that all my tenants are immigrants. And I'm not being cynical. I just can't figure out why we're unable to get that same kind of success from really good people doing really good work. What kind of ordinance needs to be written? My favorite illegal boarding house right next to one of my buildings that is constantly hurling nasty comments to my Somali tenants. We just had another guy dragged out of there last week, drunk and disorderly, and beat the hell out of his girlfriend. So I truly am not trying to be negative about what you guys are doing. It's fantastic. And maybe your hands are tied, maybe it has to do with resources, or maybe it's the ordinance that you guys have to write. I don't know what's going on, but it's a marked difference from in-town Lewiston out to Bates College. And I appreciate all the residents out near Bates wanting it to be, more calm and orderly. I was in college once, believe it or not, so I understand. But I'm still at a loss as to why an illegal boarding house exists in-town Lewiston with constant arrests and disruptions, and we don't write them tickets. So anyway, again, just lastly, I love the police. I love what you guys do for me and for us and in-town, but I just don't understand the difference between your ordinance out by Bates and mine in-town Lewiston. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else on the nuisance party ordinance? Okay, we'll take a recess until 7 o'clock when we resume the regular meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. If you have a copy of the agenda, I'm going to jump around a little bit. We have some folks who come a long way to present to us, and I'd like to move them along as fast as we can. So we're actually going to start right now with agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, resolve expressing support for the AVANGRID Central Maine Power Company's New England Clean Energy Connect project. Requested action to approve the resolve expressing support for the AVANGRID Central Maine Power Company's New England Clean Energy Connect project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Any discussion on the council? To the public?
Charles Arthur Soul, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston, Maine. First of all, I'd like to know if any of you councilors own stock in CMP or the parent company. Could I get a roll call on that?
I believe that's a no, Mr. Soul.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I wouldn't be doing business with CMP's parent company after what they put the people of Maine through regarding their bills, estimating their bills. Giving rebates back because they overcharge them, and then the individual found out that the rebate check had been tacked on to their next bill. I don't know if I'd trust CMP to come through the state of Maine with a line from Canada. Why are we dependent on Canada for electricity? 67% of our electricity is coming from Canada. We are, I believe, getting into a tariff war with them. So Maine should probably gear itself up to maybe increases in CMP's bills. Yeah, the rest of the percentage of electricity comes from Pennsylvania. So I would think hard and long before I go into any agreements with CMP's parent company, which is, someone please tell me who CMP's parent company is?
Ed, do you?
Avangrid.
Avangrid. Are they located in the United States?
I believe that they are, that company is, but it's a subsidiary of another company which is headquartered in Spain.
Headquartered in Spain, so now we're doing business through 2 other countries. What a great country. You know what scares me at 65 years old is that I'm not leaving the country that my father left to me, to my children or grandchildren. Thank you for your time.
Okay, anyone else like to speak on the CMP project? Okay, back to the council. Call the roll.
Motion by Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, this time we're going to move on. I know a lot of people are here today because there have been a lot of concerns in the community about some recent events, and I know a lot of folks are wondering what we here at City Hall, city officials and police department are doing. So we're going to start off today with a brief presentation from City Administrator Ed Barrett and Police Chief Brian O'Malley and discuss what we can, and the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I want to address the majority of my comments to the things we are doing to try to deal with, I think, the overall issues that we've seen in Kennedy Park. Then I'll turn it over to Chief O'Malley, who will have some comments about the most recent incidents. First, after the recent events, I want to let everybody know that the police department has been authorized to take any and all steps necessary, both to assist the state police in its investigation of the recent death and to provide a more visible presence in the park during periods of high usage, primarily in the afternoon and evening hours. Basically, the chief has been given authority to do what's necessary to have people available in the park to address any incidents before they get out of hand. As you will see on the agenda later this evening, we're also proposing that the City Council adopt an ordinance that will simplify our ability to police the park in the late evening and overnight hours. Currently, we have a variety of regulations that cover park operating hours as well as a curfew that applies to individuals who are 18 or under. The ordinance we're proposing tonight would set a standardized closing time for Kennedy Park at 10 p.m. Will make it much easier for the police department to police the park as it gets darker and into the overnight hours. Signs will be posted throughout the park letting everybody know of the closing hours so that they'll be informed. And certainly with the presence that we have in the area, the officers will be keeping an eye to see if there is anyone in the park after 10 p.m. Another issue that we've been looking at is the camera and surveillance system that we have in Kennedy Park. It's a fairly, has pretty good coverage of the park, but at the same time, we've looked at that system to see if it should be expanded or upgraded. And that way we'd have perhaps better records of any incidents and also would certainly assist in investigations. So tonight we'll also be asking the council to authorize us to move forward with expanding and upgrading our camera system so that we have better surveillance in the park. In just a minute, the chief will be reviewing the department's activities in response to and in investigating recent events. Before I do, though, I'd like to explain to everyone what the role of the Lewiston Police Department is in the investigation. When certain serious crimes occur, the Maine State Police are often involved in the investigation. In the case of murder investigations, which this has become, the state police take the lead role in investigating the crime, given that the Maine Attorney General's Office Death Investigation Protocol requires that all homicides are investigated by the State Police Major Crimes Unit. In this instance, then, our role is to work with and support the state police as they carry out their investigation, and that is something the department has been doing. So while we've been directly and deeply involved in the work, the state police are in overall charge of the investigation, and they are also the group that is responsible for releasing information about the investigation to the public. I think there's been some issue about who's doing what and what our role is and what the role of the state police is, so I wanted to clarify that up front. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief O'Malley for some additional information and comments.
Thank you, Ed. I first want to address people's concerns that the police aren't doing anything. This is a homicide investigation. This is a very complex case. What makes this homicide case very unusual is the number of juveniles or teenagers that are involved. When this initially occurred, we did put out a press release saying that there were teenagers and preteens. So we've been conducting investigations along with the state police at the high school, at the middle school, and the logistics involved in interviewing juveniles gets to be somewhat complex because you have to find parents and get permission to speak to them. This is ongoing, Saturday, Sunday, throughout the week. And I know people want answers quickly. Unfortunately, perhaps TV has jaded us a bit that things can be solved very quickly. It has not been a week yet, and we're doing a thorough investigation. I know that we have put out a press release asking for people to submit any videos. Everybody carries a camera with them now. Unfortunately, some people have chosen to just post those on social media, be it Facebook or Instagram, without coming to the police. So we have had detectives that are tracking down the folks that are posting these videos. We are getting videos from many different sources. As Ed talked about, we do have cameras in Kennedy Park. I've seen posts on social media saying, well, why don't you have cameras? I've had cameras in Kennedy Park for close to 10 years. We don't broadcast where they're located, but we do have them out there. I know some people in the community don't agree with that, but some people do because we try to put them in areas where we have high concentrations of people. We cannot have a rush to judgment. We want to get justice for the Giusti family, just as well as many people here in the community want. But we have to make sure that we do a thorough and a complete investigation. This is being done by the state police and the Lewiston Police Department. And once we make an arrest, once that happens, more information will be released to the public. I know it's very upsetting what occurred, but this is something that is taking longer than what usually does because of the sheer numbers of people that were involved, the sheer numbers of people that were there. This homicide occurred on the one-way section of Knox Street. It began in Kennedy Park, went down to Knox Street, so there are several cameras, there are businesses. that, videos that we are reviewing, that the state police are reviewing. We have the Maine Computer Crimes Task Force is reviewing videos. I cannot release information of possible suspects or people that we've interviewed in regards to this investigation. We cannot interfere with this investigation. We do not want to taint the investigation. We do not want to change people's witnesses' accounts of what they've seen based on what they're reading in the newspaper, what they're seeing online. We need to have a clean version of what they saw, not what they heard from their friend or from their family member, or what was seen on social media. I know it's difficult for people to understand that, and you want to have the instant gratification of an immediate arrest, but what I want to have is the arrest of the actual people that were involved. Now, as this investigation continued, my public information officer, Lieutenant Dave St. Pierre, did I think it was live on the Sun Journal and a couple other TV stations. There's questions about the ethnic background of the people that are involved. Downtown Lewiston has a large population of Somalis and many others, when we refer to them as new Mainers. I cannot release who is involved, who my suspects are, based on their ethnic background. I'm not releasing Mr. Giusti's ethnic background. That being said, I know full well, for those folks who live in the downtown area and who try to use Kennedy Park, and say the last 3 months we've been having a large problem with juveniles who are unsupervised by their parents. I have a community resource team. Officer Joe Philippon is on that team. We are reaching out to the New Mainer community in regards of trying to get assistance in helping with these unsupervised juveniles. Now, the Somalis are the largest population in downtown Lewiston for New Mainers, so they have the best representation, but we have people from Rwanda, Congo, Djibouti, all kinds of places. So we have reached out to them because they have the best representation. They have community organizers. We do outreach with them constantly. I have an officer, Officer Philippon, who goes to the mosque that meets with these people. This past Sunday, some of you may be aware that there was a news conference by the Somali elders and community representatives on the steps of City Hall. After that, I met with 25 of them in my office, along with the lieutenant of the state police who was conducting this investigation. We had reached out to them, said we need help. If you have people who don't have the English language skills, who know something, a parent who knows something, if their child was there, we need you to reach out and have them come forward and see us. The Somali representatives have been with us, canvassing the neighborhood, interpreting for us as we go door to door to talk with folks on the one-way section of Knox Street. So it frustrates my officers, it frustrates my detectives when they hear that we're not doing anything. This has been a nonstop investigation since we responded to the one-way Knox Street and found Mr. Giusti. Now, there's also been discussion about what was the cause. I can't tell you what the cause was because that's part of the investigation. I can tell you we've had an issue with a lot of juveniles who are undocumented. Unsupervised. No, that was a slip, and I apologize for that, who are unsupervised. We've had issues with BB guns. For some reason, there's been a proliferation of BB guns. 2 weeks ago, we arrested 3 juveniles with BB guns who were shooting up the windows over at the parking garage. They've been shooting at people just walking by, and it has not been based on people's race. They've been shooting at Somalis. They've been shooting at people from Congo. It does not matter. These children are unsupervised who are shooting these BB guns. We have made arrests. There was another incident where there was a video that was posted back on May 17th. Now, everyone says that these were peaceful parkgoers that were minding their own business, and perhaps that is true. However, when my police officers showed up, the gentleman who was in the confrontation with these children was highly intoxicated. We attempted to get his cooperation on 2 separate occasions. He had a minor injury to his hand. We took him to the hospital again, said, if you want to pursue this, please come see us when you're sober, and we will investigate this. And that did not happen. So I cannot force someone to report something to the police. So we're doing what we can in terms of outreach, in terms of trying to get some folks to help us with having some workers be in the park that perhaps speak the language better than we do, obviously, to interact with these children. But to say that we're not doing anything is insulting to the police, and we are here to support the city downtown. We want to make sure that we get an arrest, we get a conclusion to this arrest, but we need time to do it. And at no time, I think, if everybody thinks about when we've had homicides, and we haven't had a homicide in Lewiston in 4 years, do we always just tell you everything that's going on as we're doing it? Do we call up the Sun Journal and talk to Judy Myers or Russ Dillingham or Mark LaFlamme and say, we're going to go interview this person or that person? We do not, because it's an official police investigation. You're not sworn law enforcement officers. I know it's upsetting that we can't give you this information, but this is what we have to do so we get to the final conclusion, so we don't lose cases, things aren't dismissed, things don't get thrown out. Everybody has rights, we're following them. I'm not looking to arrest somebody based on their ethnic background. I'm looking to arrest somebody based on their behavior that led to the death of Donald Giusti. That's what we want as a community, and that's what we're going to do. And that's all I can say about the investigation.
Could you talk briefly, Chief? I know there's some frustration from the 8 of us here. I know a lot of people want to hear from elected officials. Can you talk about the volatility of the neighborhood at the moment and why we have been very nicely asked? I know people have claimed we are under gag orders, which is not true, but why we have been asked, by yourself to refrain at this time.
As I said, we need to have our witnesses in this incident not be influenced by the news, not be influenced by social media. The state police and the Attorney General's office are the ones that have to do the press releases. We were doing them initially because Mr. Giusti had not passed away. We were able to do some press releases. However, we knew that his injuries were serious. That's why immediately that night we contacted the State Police Major Crimes Unit to come and assist us. But their directive to us is that any press release has to come from them. I can't talk about evidence. I can't talk about witnesses. It all has to come from the State Police and the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Chief. Ed, are you?
Well, I think the only other thing we want to say is that if people have followed any of this on social media, there have been a lot of inappropriate, threatening comments. And I don't think that that is the direction that we want to go in as a community. We don't want to try to make the situation more tense and more difficult. We want to make sure that we're working together as a community, number one, to solve the crime that we're dealing with today, to make sure that the folks who are friends and relatives of Mr. Giusti get justice and can see the process through. We also want to try to make sure that our community is a safe and unthreatening atmosphere for all of our residents, regardless of their background. So I would just ask everyone, I think most people here would agree with that, and if they can just join with us in trying to ensure that we behave ethically and appropriately and with an understanding of that words can be also hurtful, that would be a positive for the entire community.
And I will expand a little bit on what Ed said, that what we're doing. I have assigned 2 officers, foot patrol, who are patrolling Kennedy Park, the one-way section of Knox Street, until at least 2 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know if everybody knows this, the park is divided up into 2 sections. One part closes at 9, one part closes at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's very difficult for the office to enforce that. That's why I've asked Ed to come to the city council. We'll go with a 10 o'clock. We're going to post the signs, and once our community that utilizes the park realizes 10 o'clock is the time that this park closes, then we won't have the issues of people hanging out and being in the park. Now, people will say, well, you've let the kids be in there. Well, yes, we have, because a lot of the times the kids are just playing basketball. We need someplace for these kids to go. I'd rather have them playing basketball in Kennedy Park than running around the streets and running up and down through hallways and back alleyways. But we are enforcing the curfew. We are closing the park. But we need to get a consistent closing time for the park, because right now it's divided into 2 separate times. And that's why I'm going to be in front of the city council tonight asking them to change the time to 10 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you very much for that update. I hope that alleviated some of the questions for the public. So at this time, we are going to move into our normal public comment period. Now, our council rules state the public comment period is to last 15 minutes in total. I know we have a lot of people here today. I know a lot of people do want to speak, and I want everybody to be able to have that opportunity. So I am willing to extend that public comment time today. I would ask, because of the number of people and allowing everyone to speak, if we could try to keep our comments down under a couple of minutes. Try to keep it to 2 minutes if we can. The purpose of public comment also is to comment. It's the opportunity to address the city council regarding your issues or concerns, but it is not a question and answer session. If you do have any questions, you can email me. There's a pile of my business cards up on the podium. My email address is there. My cell phone is the number on it. You can call, text, or email. I will do the best to answer all your questions. If it's not something I can answer, I will forward it to Ed or the police chief or to someone who can. so we can make sure all your questions do get answered. So public comments will be made from the podium at your left. When you speak, please begin, state your name, your address for the records. I'm also going to ask you to note that all comments should be directed to me as chair of the meeting. They should be presented with decorum and civility, not in a threatening, profane, vulgar, or abusive manner. Please show the same respect to others that you would wish to have shown to you. I will reserve the right at any time to ask any speaker to conclude his or her remarks if they become repetitious or disorderly. Speakers will be permitted to speak only once, and if you have a prepared statement or any other documents you would like to share with the council, you may provide those to the city clerk, and she will make sure that we all end up with a copy tomorrow. For other members of the audience, please don't interrupt, question the speakers. No booing, clapping, other displays, please. We need to recognize that it can produce a chilling effect and inhibit their free speech. Loud, disruptive behavior or other actions which interfere with the orderly conduct of the meeting will also not be tolerated. So, with that, the podium is open.
My name's Nick Vinciguerra.
Oh, right into the microphone, Nick, if you could. Thank
Okay.
you.
Nick Vinciguerra. Oh, this one? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Nick Vinciguerra, 48 Maple Street. I just at first want to start thanking the chief of police and everybody else here for all their work they are doing on the Donnie case. He was my best friend, and I just was wondering if there was any way to maybe put more curfews down the streets as well as not just the park, to maybe keep the teens also off the streets as well. And maybe workshops to help people learn the Somali language so we can better communicate with them. Maybe neighborhood watch, stuff like that. I just want the violence to stop because we don't need any more friends in the streets. And like I said, I just want to thank everybody. I just want to throw those couple ideas out there and thank everybody once again. And the curfew would probably be a good idea because that, as you said, it was mostly teens and some young adults and preteens. A curfew would keep them off the street where we wouldn't have to feel unsafe walking out of our doors at night. It's everybody, not just white, red, it don't matter the color. Everybody feels unsafe, and we shouldn't feel that way in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Charles Soul, 135 Bartlett Street. I live 2 blocks from the park, and usually the park is pretty quiet. I just wanted to remind the public that I'm not going to be blaming the whole for the actions of the part of the whole. I'm hoping you understand that. The actions of one person does not, should not reflect on the entire group of anyone participating in that event. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Oh, no, you go.
My name is Chastity. I live in Auburn. My daughter had gotten in a fight at Kennedy Park in the beginning of May, and I had called the cops. And when I called the cops just pretty much told me to stay out of the park. And then I was the one that recorded the fight on May 17th and also called the cops. And I'm just kind of upset that it took this for action to be taken, for something to be done. And I feel like we just need more communication with the Somalian and all of us, because on Facebook it's nothing but hate talk and blames, and it shouldn't have had to come to a death in the park after all this has been happened for something to be taken done.
Thank you, Chastity.
My name's Casey Graham. I live at 36.5 Shawmut Street, Lewiston. Yeah, I'm with her. I see a lot of, I'm well aware that probably none of you guys live downtown, not one of you. So you don't really have an eye's view at what happens downtown. I was in the park just a few days ago where an 11-year-old boy got shot by a BB gun. I won't blame race or anything, but it happened. People called the cops. The cops got dispatched, if you remember that, sir. And the kid ran inside, changed his clothes, came outside, and the cops said there's nothing they can do. They didn't even attempt to look for the person. They didn't go in no houses. And that's just one incident upon incidences every day that occur in the park. I work 50 hours a week. I come home, I bring my kids to the park to enjoy the rest of my day. And there's always altercations breaking up. Now, this gentleman could say that he's doing everything he can. Sadly, that's not enough because the fights are still happening. The rivalry is still happening. And that protest ain't going to solve nothing. And it's really frustrating. My daughter's bike got stolen twice in the park in the same day that I had to chase people down to go get it back. The cops were called. Nothing was done. And it seems like that's a familiar story. Nothing is done. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Casey.
Hello, my name is George Hamilton. I live on Ash Street in Lewiston. I arrived in Maine to Portland, where I served a decade of community service working with juvenile delinquents. And I want to tell you something, that the police are a wonderful asset. They do everything they can for us and for our benefit, but I also want to tell you that juvenile law prohibits a lot for them, and poor parenting creates a lot of problems for them. I want to tell you that I've put juveniles to the task time and time again for a decade, bringing them to work sites and showing them respect and encouragement, despite the lack of ethics and morals that they have exhibited. They have been both perpetrators and victims in this situation. And we, as a community, can bring them up. It takes a village to raise children. We have the opportunity to both work with our police force and create community policing that allows parents to be better supervisors and chaperones. We not only have lost an individual here in Lewiston this week, but we have also lost children in this community twice in the past month. And a lot of this is on our own hands. I would like us all to share in community support through volunteerism, and that's what I bring to this conversation tonight.
Thank you, George. Oh, just go on up when you...
Yeah, my name's Jay Allen. I own many buildings in town Lewiston. And my fear at this point is that we're going to turn this into a racial issue. And I don't believe for a minute that it is a racial issue. I think, and with all condolences to the man who died, and truly I mean that. And I'm not saying that what I'm about to say reflects on him at all, because I don't know the circumstances. But I would tell you that most of the time, and again, maybe not including this instance, because I don't know, but people that are hanging out in the park late at night, after dark, whether they're 15 or 45, they don't have one of three things, okay? They don't have a job, they don't have a family that cares about them, at least, and they don't have a dream, because you don't hang out looking for trouble if you've got any of those three things, okay? So the majority, in fact, the vast majority of my tenants are from Somalia, Angola, the Congo, and Djibouti. And I can tell you with an absolute certainty, I don't think there's anyone in this room that has spent more time in town Lewis in the last 4 years than me. And I witness what goes on there all the time. In fact, on the way over here tonight, literally before I got here, I was on Horton Street, where it intersects with Walnut Street, and there was a, and I'm not sure where she was from, but I'm almost sure that she was Somalian. She's in a van with her young children, and she pulled up to turn left onto Walnut Street, and she edged into the crosswalk a little bit, where I witnessed a guy dragging his pit bull, and that's only because he just can't afford a gun, so right, he's got a pit bull, his pregnant, toothless girlfriend walk up to the window of the car and start screaming at her because she was in the effing Crosswalk. And it went on because she couldn't go, there were cars coming. And I'm just sitting there thinking, is this really what this has come down to? You're going to start screaming at people because, oh, look, I'm getting a little worked up about this, and I'll get out of here in a second. All I'm telling you, this isn't a black and white issue. It is people that have got no guidance, and it certainly isn't about being an immigrant. Virtually all of my families work. Most of the mothers are working third shift at Walmart. I hired guys that are Angolan that work harder than anyone I've ever seen. One of them needs a car, and so now he's got another full-time job at night so he can afford a car. Okay? I've got one family from Yemen who's got 5 kids in college. So what I'm telling you is, do not turn this into a black versus white or, native Lewiston people against immigrant people, because that's not what it is. It's just people that just don't have their crap together. And they're looking for some drama, and they're finding it. And I'm really sorry for the man who got killed. But if we allow this to turn into the immigrants versus the white people, all hell's going to break loose. And we don't need that because it really isn't the case. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Hello, I'm Kim Fush. I live on the corner of Horton and Walnut. This is Liberty. She's also a concerned citizen. There's really a lot going on, so I'm going to just look at some notes. I really appreciate everything everyone has said so far, especially the citizens. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. I do agree that social media influence is really having a huge impact on this situation. There's a lot of negativity. It's what I call race baiting, meaning there's always someone that's going to jump into any chaos situation, and they're going to deliberately manipulate the public to get attention, to increase the excitement, and things like that. But when you know the facts, when you speak into the police department, when you're watching this stuff happening right outside your window, you know what's really going on. And he was absolutely right. They're doing as much as they can. And you were right, too, when you said more needs to be done. More needs to be done. So what can we do? I like what George had to say because he mentioned, he talked a little bit about citizen empowerment. All I can think of is the police are right out straight. It's nonstop, day and night. They're going from one thing to another, to another, to another. This goes on all night long. I'm curious how a curfew would affect Kennedy Park. I have positive things to say because I think any effort to curb this is good, but I'm curious if it'll just trickle down to other areas near the park. I believe that's a very likely possibility. Because they're going to, that's just one more thing that the police department has to enforce. When I was listening about the nuisance ordinance, I was listening to him describe all of the steps that he has to take just to do one situation. That's a lot of work, and I really like this ticket idea. If you have clear evidence that someone has done something disorderly and you can give them a ticket, I think that's going to save a lot of time and effort, because if I'm having an emergency and I need a police officer to come see me right away, I would really like to hope that they could get there in a timely manner instead of dealing with silliness. Because sometimes disorderly conduct is just plain silliness. People are just getting a little carried away. It needs to be addressed. It doesn't need to take all day. It doesn't need to take all night. You don't need all this time in the courtroom. And it's about some personal responsibility. I think it's extremely important that people understand that even though the racism stuff is being thrown out there, don't fall for it. Know that you're being baited. Don't do it. Like he said, there is a small group of youths that they have been trying to get a hold of, talking about unsupervised children throughout the entire community, not just Kennedy Park. They're doing what they can. It's really difficult to prosecute youths. I've spent a lot of time as a volunteer advocate in the courtrooms. I know what they have to deal with, and I've seen the looks on their faces when they're told, I'm sorry, but we really can't do much about this. So how can I better assist who's out there literally dealing with these kids. Well, I can be a better observer. I can be a better reporter. I can empower everybody else around me to say, hey, if you see this stuff is going on, the reason when the police come there and they say there's nothing we can do, well, there's a reason for that. It's really hard to prosecute a crime unless you have really good information to go forward with it. So if people are saying, well, I think this happened, or I might have seen it, or my friend told me about it, or I saw it on Facebook, guys, that's not enough. They need tangible information that they can put somewhere and take it to the court so that the court can back up what they're doing. So, you know, citizen empowerment is huge. We need to start paying attention. Let's not get so hooked up on our cell phones and our computers and what everybody's saying on Facebook. Let's actually pay attention to what's going on. You know, and I mean, his heart went out to the couple that was just trying to drive down the street and they're getting screamed at. It's not just happening to the ethnics. We have such a diverse community. I mean, I live on the corner of Horton and Walnut, and let me tell you, I have no cable. I haven't needed it in 4 years. It's pretty exciting. Wow, the things that she has seen. But like, you know, like he said, that you could be walking. I've seen a guy just get out of work. He was walking across the street. He had work boots on. He was a total wreck. Looked like he just picked up soda or something. He was going home, and someone yelled at him because he stepped in the crosswalk when the car was going to go, and they just went at it. And I was just like, geez, guys, everybody is fighting, literally everybody. So the only thing I can suggest is, like I said, citizen empowerment, keep a good communication with the police department, and when you make that call, please have something valid to give them. How do you get something valid? Well, you know, pay attention. Have your recorder ready. If you think something is going down, get some kind of information. Get on the phone, and dispatch will say, yes, we're aware of the situation, whatever it is. Just make the call. Help each other out. We really need to be a little bit smarter about what we're doing. These are some ways I think it can help. I like the idea of increasing the security cameras. I'm not personally too worried about that. I think it would be a great source of information. I do know that after the arsons, cameras were installed on Bartlett and Walnut and a couple of other places, so you kind of can't get out of that area without being seen. You're seen everywhere. Make sure you wave. But, you know, it just seems like the tension is rising. That's the last thing I want to comment on. The tension is rising. They're doing what they can. The city is overwhelmed. Stuff is going on Facebook. The courts are maxed out. So we are large in numbers, and we actually are in a position to do something about this, in my opinion. And the first thing is to change the way we look at things. Stop judging someone who's out there who's drunk, falling on their face, being an idiot, and putting them down and being like, you know, that's not something you want to call the police out. You might want to understand that person is struggling and maybe just, you know, think about that fact. But the fighting is intense, and I believe the fighting is increasing because people think that the police department is not doing enough. What you don't know is there is a lot that's happening that they are doing, and like you said, you really, any investigation with anything, you can't just be like, so this is the guy, this is what happened. We're not going to be informed because we need to give them a chance to do what they have to do. So the frustration is coming from the fact that citizens are afraid, they don't think enough is being done, and they're not really sure what to suggest. So know that stuff is being done, know that you're in a position to help, but at the same time, I think we just need to have an understanding that what can be done. If you feel like nothing's being done, there's a reason. Is there something in the court system that is not allowing prosecutors to go forward with charges? Before it gets to that, is there something that is not coming to the police department that they need to better go after these alleged vandals, we'll say? Absolutely yes, in all areas. So let's take it a step further. What about the person walking down the street? You've seen me walking down the street with my golden retrievers day after day for 4 years. I've gotten to know so many people in this community. I mean, there are, let's just face it, there are hookers, there's drug dealers, there's homeless people, there's alcoholics, there's drug addicts, and every single one of those people are coming from a really difficult place and they're struggling. So it's up to us to understand that we're all here together, we all care, and we all need to try to be a little more patient, but maybe communicate with each other a little bit better. Let's pay a little bit better attention to what's happening and try not to get so outraged. I can tell you, I know how to do this because my own daughter this past winter was attacked by 3 boys and 1 girl. They wanted her sled. That was over on Bartlett Street Hill. She was by herself. An adult was within a number of houses away, and these kids literally jumped her and wrestled her to the ground, put their hands around her neck and choked her, beat her, and scratched her. Nobody was paying attention. Nobody saw what happened. She managed to get her sled away, threatened to call police, and was able to walk most of the rest of the way home, where she was met by me. So if anybody should be annoyed, pissed off, and furious, it would be me. But I'm patient, and I'm loving, and I'm peaceful, and I'm compassionate, and I'm understanding. And I'm doing my best to give some forgiveness. I believe that happened because these youths are unsupervised, and this is something that we're all going to work on together. They're going to increase the security cameras. The police have already discussed this one plan that they did in the Bates Street area. It's shown to be very successful. I think he said 42 arrests in a year, or convictions in a year. I may be mistaken, but I think if we just tried a little harder to work with each other, you know, talk to each other, find out what's going on, gather information. You can call in anonymous to make reports. You can give tips and information to the police department in other manners. And you can certainly come to city council meetings. I just wanted to add real quick that I'm an independent Green Party candidate for District 61. That is extremely congested district. It is nonstop car crashes, street fights day and night.
Kim, thank you. I'd hate to cut you off, but I did give you 2 minutes. I gave Liberty 2 as well.
Yes. Just keep in mind some citizen empowerment, and I just wanted to let you know I'll try to represent you as best I can.
Thank you very much, Kim. And I did let the last couple speakers go a little over. You may notice the city clerk's throwing me an envelope with the word time written on it. I'm trying to give you guys a little latitude, but we're already approaching the 30-minute mark. So if we can do what we can to keep them brief, I thank the speakers. But like I said, I gave you Liberty's 2 minutes. So good job, Liberty.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Steve Hassan, 21 Roland Ave. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the police chief, all of his men and women, for doing what they can do out there. I've heard the word parents mentioned a couple times tonight. The bottom line, this is a parenting problem. This is not a police problem. This is not a city council problem. This is a parenting problem. When your 12-year-old goes outside the house in the middle of the summer and they have on 5 different colored T-shirts, I might ask why. They're not asking why. The games they're playing with the police and the public are crazy. You can sit and watch them. They'll go, they'll commit something, run around the corner and come out in a different colored shirt. And yes, you did. And it's true. My job allows me to watch this happen every weekend through the school year. And it's just incredible. And I ask myself over and over, where are the parents? And so as you move forward and you try to get control of this situation the best you can, and you write ordinances and stuff, I would encourage you to make it 1, maybe 2 strikes on the juvenile, and then grab the parent and throw them in the can, okay? Because that's what it's going to take. It takes a community to raise, no, it takes parenting to raise a child. And until you're getting that buy-in from parents, not police, not the city council, not the people here, parents. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
My name is Susan Coker, and I live at 81 Ash Street.
Could you pull the mic down to you, Susan? Thank you.
Anyways, I live at 81 Ash Street, and I just come from Marcotte Park, where we had a gathering there, and what it boils down to is we all need to stand for peace.
Thank you, Susan.
Good evening. My name is Pauline Goodis. Steve was right. We need parenting with these children. And the city has that key. It's actually in the city ordinance. It's section 5082 sub B. I have a copy of the ordinance. I highlighted it, but I'll read what it says. A parent or guardian of a minor commits an offense if he knowingly permits or by insufficient control allows the minor to remain in any public place or on the premises of any establishment within the city during curfew hours. I'll hand a copy of that to Chief O'Malley. He can give it to the clerk. Maybe the council would like to review it, and maybe that needs to be enforced. But what has to happen, too, is the people of downtown need to take responsibility for what's occurring in downtown. If you see something, say something. If you see a crime occur, you're not a rat. You are being the guardian of the street when you call the police, when you give a witness statement, sitting back and saying, I ain't talking to the police. I have been in law enforcement for over 30 years. My area of law enforcement was working the downtown. I worked extensively with Chief O'Malley. The police department is doing everything they can, but you can't expect them to read minds or anything else if you don't cooperate. To the people that hang out in Kennedy Park, you're extremely lucky. Kennedy Park has received that area, over $2 million. And it's set to receive another $2 million in the next few years in improvement. I am on the planning board, and until things settle downtown, I will not vote to have the taxpayers take on a bond for $500,000 a year for the next 5 years to keep Kennedy Park looking great. If the community doesn't care about it, why should the taxpayers of the rest of the city pay for a park downtown? There are areas of the city that want parks. Pettingill School, they wanted a park in that area. Guess what they were told? Raise the money. If you want a park, you raise the money. We have the ability to have a handicapped accessible park in the former Marquardt Park. Guess where their money's coming? Not from the city. They have to do fundraising. The people in downtown need to understand they have been blessed by the taxpayers that live in this city of having parks like Kennedy Park, Potvin Park, Parity Park. People need to take care of it. I don't see people sitting in the park. They sit all day. What's going to hurt you to pick up a trash bag? Pick up the trash. You come into the city. My husband works for the city. He comes in the morning, and that basketball court and all around this end of Kennedy Park is nothing but trash. Take pride in your area. You can be poor, but you don't have to be a slob. When you say you're wanting things to change downtown, every person that's sitting here that lives downtown, how hard is it for you to pick up 10 or 15 feet of your street? Take a ride down Knox Street. Go up Walnut Street. The amount of trash. It might not be your trash. It's not my trash. But as a taxpayer, I'm paying Public Works to come into the city every day and pick up the trash. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to start taking care of your area. I walk around my block. We take a trash bag. We pick up garbage. It's not that hard. Take pride in your community. If you want things to change, take pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline.
Hi, my name is Christine. I live at 2 Swale Lane in Lewiston. I never know if what I'm trying to say is going to come out right, but I'm going to try. I work downtown in the community gardens, so I just want to put that out there too, if you see me. There's a lot of anger in Lewiston. People are fighting all the time. And I just want to ask people to take a minute to think about where that anger is coming from. We are a city of highly traumatized people. People are poor. Their babies are getting poisoned by lead. We have refugees who lived in refugee camps for, 10 years, folks that, were starving, walking across the desert for 6 months to get to Kenya to, try to survive, seeing their parents, shot in front of them. There's just a lot of trauma in this city, and people are feeling really stuck, and people don't have the resources to be able to have a good life. People want a good life, but they can't provide a good life for themselves and their children. So many of the apartments downtown are so substandard. There's a lot of reason for people to be really angry and to have a lot of rage over the fact that there's so much poverty and so much trauma. So that's what I see. I don't see lazy poor people. I don't really see, irresponsible parents. I see people that are just so strung out and so struggling, people losing their family members to drugs, people losing their, best friends, because of a brawl in the park, which, I just want to say, so much condolences. I feel a lot of pain in this situation. So I just want to put it out there that in my opinion, this is way beyond, to me, call the cops, clean up the city, care for the park. It's like, get the lead out of here, get people good jobs, get people health care, make sure that refugee folks are able to have the resources they need and integrate in ways that feel good and sustaining, So I just want to ask people to think about how we're a city of struggling people, and we need to come together, over race and class and gender, and just make the city I think it's a great place to live, even though it's really hard to live here, but just make it, a city where people don't have to be so pissed off. And then I just want to also say, I just want to ask people to try to reserve judgment on other people's parenting too. I know that there are kids that are doing stuff that's not cool, and also just to also try to put yourself in the position of being a refugee from a culture that is just so different, so different in every way, and then trying to transplant your way of life in a completely different place, and just have some empathy on how hard it is to do that. Some cultural things are really hard to translate, so I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Hi, my name's Amanda Graham, 36.5 Sharma Street. So there's a couple of things I wanted to just state. Okay, everybody keeps mentioning that it's nighttime at Kennedy Park is the problem. For one, the incident that happened to a good friend Donnie of mine, that didn't happen at nighttime. That was during the day. And I think that the biggest issue is over on Knox Street. It's not even Kennedy Park. Yeah, they might come over to Kennedy Park or whatever, but no, the biggest issue is Knox Street. And how am I supposed to go down and help clean up these streets if I try going to a basketball court and I'm getting chased out? Or I'm going down Knox Street and I'm getting shot at with a BB gun. Now, how am I supposed to do anything to help the city if I'm not even allowed to walk around? That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Amanda.
Sorry, I got a ritual. My name is Melissa Dunn. I'm a resident and community organizer. I reside on 254 Blake Street, and I've lived in downtown most of my life. First, I just wanted to say that I pay respect to Donnie Giusti, and his family that I met on Sunday. I lost a friend recently, and I'm going to a funeral tomorrow for a different friend. And there's no words that can ever express the pain and sorrow and how sorry you are for somebody else and their loss of life and what they bring to your family and your community. The day of the incident, I started receiving text messages from folks in my community reaching out for me to help them to process the situation. to express their fears and pains and worries. That very night, I left a gala. It was a beautiful event, but I was preoccupied, and I felt immediately I had to do what I know best, and that's to talk to people in the downtown community, right at Kennedy Park, and not to find out specifics, because it didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was being there, listening to them, listening to their thoughts on the situation, listening to whatever emotions that they were holding in that moment. It was really important just to be there. And I also was there to ask them, what would it take for you in the community to process this or to feel safer? And they gave me answers. They talked to me. So I started embarking on a kind of planning group thing. I don't know, it's gotten so big right now. We have like over 20 people, but we're primarily talking to residents within the downtown and lifting their voices. We have an event on Saturday that I'm working really hard to get Dennis information for, called Lewiston United for Hope and Peace. But there was things from those conversations that people really wanted to focus on, and one of them was bystander training. Like, what do you do to kind of interject, like, or deflect, like, hate speech if you're witnessing it, as long as you're not getting yourself in a situation where you might face retaliatory action or, like, physical harm. Another one was knowing your rights, because we were hearing from folks in the community about some of the concerns they had with the Lewiston Police Department, asking questions, and people felt like they needed to know their rights when it came to interacting with police. Another one was just like processing and grieving the whole situation, coming to terms with it. Really, the event is based on community building, getting people together to kind of address violence in our city, and not just for Donald or Donnie, as his friends know him, but also for the violence that happens every day. Domestic violence, human trafficking, the opioid crisis. I mean, these are all things. And nobody knows their struggle more than poor people, and they need to lead that struggle. It's not necessarily policing. It's not necessarily cameras. We have solutions. We have real solutions, and we're working to obtain more solutions from people in the downtown that can be substantial, you know, and really hold one another accountable, you know, and be there for one another when the system is not. Because like Christine said, what you're seeing is a direct result of systemic and systematic oppression of working class and poor people. And wherever their identities intersect, it makes that oppression worse. So I just wanted to remind folks, in 2001, we had white supremacists marching the streets of Lewiston. And the community came together to fight back through many and one, to say that's not welcome here. It's not welcome here. We have to come together to unite. We have to come together to find solutions for our community. We have to heal. It's really important. It's really critical in a time like this, because we don't want this to happen in our streets. We care about our community. That's why a lot of folks are here. We care. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. We are pushing about 50 minutes of public comment, so we could keep them brief, but I do still want to give everyone the opportunity, so.
Hi, my name's Honey Rourke. I live at 163 Pine Street. I just wanted to say, you know, when it comes to the police, and everybody needs to know this, when they are doing an investigation, I'm sure everybody's seen me on TV a few months ago. My mom was murdered. I've been dealing with the state police for 40 years, and most of them that are working with the police department. It does take a long time to do an investigation. If you rush it, you might arrest the wrong people, and you don't want that, because then the bad ones are still out there. And it has nothing to do with, you know, what color. It really doesn't. I'm from Richmond. I've been here 5 years, and I have seen so much bad stuff since I've been here. I couldn't even believe it. And, you know, I had a son that was out of control when he was young. I put him in a group home here in Lewiston. They had a rule. No more than 4 teenagers at a time could be together, or they were considered a gang. And that worked. And I don't see that anymore. And I'll be walking the street, and I'll see, it don't matter if Somali, white, whenever I see a bunch of boys together, I'm seeing them break windows, I'm seeing them do drugs, I'm seeing them, doing all kinds of things. There was 4 boys that bothered my granddaughter at school. She had to leave the school for 2 weeks so they could get it under control. I don't feel that was right. They should have been the ones taken out. The point of the matter is, I think maybe if you could do something about so many kids being together as a group, you might have less problems. And like Amanda said, a lot of this stuff happens during the day, not after 10 o'clock. But I know a lot of other cities, like Richmond and those places, no teens are allowed out after 9. Under 16 years old are not allowed out after 9 o'clock. I just think the community has to come together and work together on the streets, the individual streets. And like they said, it's not being, a narc calling the cops, telling you what's going on. And that's the biggest thing. I have been called a narc because I called the police on a bunch of hookers that were breaking into a house, and they had dropped crack pipes on the ground, and a little girl walked up to me, "What do I do with this?" And she had it in her hand. I said, "Drop it, I'll take care of it." And I called the police. But we shouldn't have to deal with that stuff, and the thing is it's going to take all of us to do something. And you guys all have to give the police a chance to do their investigation the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Last call. So I want to thank everybody for coming, for being part of the process, for speaking. Apologize, I have a cough drop in my mouth. Believe me, it's in your best interest. Before you all go, though, and go away, I would like the chief just to give a very brief 1-2 on our curfew and what that entails, what the hours are, and the age restrictions. And I also want to speak for 1 minute. I know, we hear a little bit about proactiveness, and after the first incident, myself and Officer Philippon did, go to the mosque, and we did start having some conversations in that community and the community as a whole, and we did start talking internally here as staff and at the council to start working on some solutions. So some of these things have been brewing longer than the last incident. So there has been some proactiveness. But Chief, if you could just talk about the curfew for just a second.
Yeah, we had a discussion, some folks have brought up curfew. We have 2 different curfews in the city. We have the curfew in the park. I talked a little bit about Kennedy Park, how it has 2 different times. The remainder of the parks in the city, throughout the city, have a 9 o'clock curfew. We also have a curfew for anyone under 18, 17 and under. Sunday through Thursday, that's till 10 o'clock, 10 to 5 a.m. in the morning, and then Friday and Saturday, it's 12 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning. However, there are exceptions to that if someone is leaving work, if they're at a sporting event. If they're going on an errand and have parents' permission to go from point A to point B without a detour, they can be out in the streets. The other night, one of my officers was working in Kennedy Park, and there was a 5-year-old with his 10-year-old brother that was walking through Kennedy Park to go from his house to his grandmother's house. So we do have a curfew. The difficulty is when we have such large numbers of underage kids that are out that are violating the curfew. That would tie up the majority of and they are in groups, and we do have a curfew. Prior to this incident occurring, Officer Philippon was researching about getting signs to post the park, to post around in certain areas where we're having these group of kids gather so they would be aware that there is an actual city curfew. Officer Philippon also conducts training with folks downtown to educate them on what they can and can't do with their kids, what they can do about the curfews. We've had questions regarding what actual drugs look like now that the marijuana is legal. Some parents aren't even aware of what that really looks like, so we have pamphlets with some of the community groups that we work with which will identify it to parents. But I agree with a lot of what a lot of folks said here, that it just can't be the police. You can't just say, Chief, go out and arrest them, or Chief, give them a ticket. We need parental involvement, we need community involvement to solve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And again, thank you, everybody, for coming out and for conducting yourself in a really, really great manner. So thank you. I'm going to recess till 10 past. And thanks again. All right. Thank you all for your patience. And agenda item number 1.
Item number 1, public hearing on a new application for new liquor license for the Cupcakery 56 Sabata Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application for the Cupcakery 56 Sabata Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor LaJoy, seconded by Councilor Ray. Discussion on the council. The public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 2.
Item number 2, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Ben's Burritos, 97 Lisbon Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Ben's Burritos, 97 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Cloutier. Council. Public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 3.
Item number 3, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Pelletier's Banquet Facility, 711 Webster Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Pelletier's Banquet Facility, 711 Webster Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Marcotte, seconded by Councilor Cloutier. Discussion on the council. And to the public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
And Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing for approval of an outdoor entertainment permit for live musical event in, actually, this has been moved to
Pettingill Park.
Pettingill Park. So thank you very much. For a live musical event in Pettingill Park. To conduct a public hearing on an application for an outdoor entertainment event in Pettingill Park and to grant a permit for an outdoor entertainment event as required by the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Article 1, Section 10-3 for an outdoor music event to be held at Pettingill Park on Saturday, June 23rd, contingent upon positive recommendations from the Police Department, Fire Department, Code Health Officer, and Land Use Inspector regarding compliance with all regulations and compliance with all city ordinances.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Ray. Discussion on the council. The public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
And Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 4A.
Number 4A, public hearing and first and final passage regarding an emergency ordinance for an amendment to the Parks and Recreation Ordinance to establish a standardized time of 10 p.m. for the closure of Kennedy Park. There are 3 items for requested action. The first item, that the proposed amendments to the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 54, Parks and Recreation, regarding the change of time for the closure of Kennedy Park from 1 a.m. to 10 p.m., receive first passage by a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor LaJoy, seconded by Councilor Pettingill. Discussion on the council.
Yes.
Councilor Beam.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why we have two 4A and 4B.
The reason is that this first ordinance is an emergency ordinance. If it's adopted, it goes into effect immediately.
Oh, I see.
But as an emergency ordinance, it also automatically is repealed 61 days from the date it's enacted. So to make it permanent, you then have to follow the regular ordinance process, which is what 4B is for.
Okay, great, thank you. I also did want to say that although I'm going to vote for this ordinance, I think that 10 o'clock is too late, especially for 12-year-olds. 12 and under should be in their houses by 8 o'clock at night. Older kids, maybe 16 and under, 17 and under, 9 o'clock. I know things happen during the day, but they can gather in each other's houses if they want to, under parental supervision. But eventually, I think we should get to that point. I don't think that's too harsh on anyone. So I will vote for this as a starting point, and because a lot of thought has gone into it. But I I think you should revisit this sometime and bring it down to certainly 8 o'clock for 12 and under.
So Ed, the curfew would still be in effect for the underage kids? This is just for
Curfew
the
would still be
general
in-
public?
Yes, the
Okay.
curfew would still be in effect for underage kids, but that curfew during the weeknights doesn't kick in until 10 PM. So part of our thinking here, because we did talk about time, given the amount of utilization that the park gets, and also the fact that in the summertime, particularly this time of year, well, you can often, if it's not cloudy out, you can still be out there and be in twilight until 9:30, quarter to 10. So the theory was to try to leave it open for, in particular, the use of the basketball courts, some of the other areas of the park until that time. The other parks do close at 9, so you could certainly make an argument for that. I think it would also be very difficult for us to have differential times for younger and older kids. This, again, is for everybody. This basically just says at 10 o'clock, you got to be out of the park. So that makes it very easy for the police department to enforce.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Cludier?
Two things. I know former school committee chair Scott recommended that we get, if this is approved tonight, that we get the information out to the superintendent so that he can get it home with students
Yes,
and
I
parents.
spoke with one of the members of the school committee tonight, and
Before
she
the school year
indicated that she would
ends,
follow through on that.
which is on Thursday. So there's a quick turnaround needed on that one. And then, I can't remember what my second was, so maybe it'll come back to me.
Senior moment at 43.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for telling all of Lewiston my age.
It's going to lighten up the day somehow. Councilor Marco?
Do we have the language on a special memo, or is this the only language in the agenda?
This is the actual language of the current section in our park ordinance that's attached on the emergency ordinance itself. It basically amends, at the current time, as Chief mentioned, we have 2 time limits.
Yeah, I just noticed it was attached to the
Okay.
handout at the beginning of the meeting. And I would agree with Councilor Beam that we should revisit this at a later time to fine tune it.
Okay.
Could we maybe set up a workshop in July or early August to take a look at curfew?
Yes.
Give us a couple months of the PD out there enforcing, and we'll have a little more data to go by.
We certainly can.
Councilor
That was,
Lyson?
yeah, that was my question, because I agree with the chief. Remember playing basketball at close to midnight and enjoying that kind of freedom, and having the police come over and say, "What are you guys doing?" We're going, "Playing basketball." What do you mean, you know? So I think that in the skate park, I don't know what the utilization is at, like what time kids go home or whatever, but I think we can look at different areas of the park too to see if there should be some special time. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ray?
I thought of it again. Also a senior moment at 28. But so I'm just curious, what if the chief could illuminate us, or sorry, I'm struggling, on what happens if someone is out in the park after that period of time? What does this curfew do, and what are steps for a lot of concerned citizens? We're here tonight. What should they do if they hear a disturbance, that sort of thing?
Well, if they hear a disturbance, they can call the police.
Great.
What normally happens is my officers will tell those who are under 18 to go home. If they're over 18, you need to get out of the park. You know, I really would like to have this as a tool to assist us in dealing with this issue that we're having. In years past, we've had a couple tenants who live right over here at the corner who, this time of year, when the summertime, when the window's open, we've allowed the kids to play basketball, as Councilor Lyson said. However, then they start getting a little loud, so they'll call at 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, and then we'll have to tell the kids it's time to close down and go home. I've been hesitant to enforce a 9 o'clock curfew just for the mere fact of kids need someplace to go. However, with the uptick in calls for service that I've seen in the last 3 months at Kennedy Park, there is no lights that are on at that time, so they kind of play in that far corner where they're playing by street light. We need to, as a city, do something. The 10 o'clock is actually extending it an hour of what the curfew is now. We have in the past, when there's been issues, closed the park at 8 o'clock at night when we've had something occur over there. But I need the city council to work with me so I can have my officers have something that they can try to enforce. And I did have a few family members come up to some of my officers who are working a foot patrol in Kennedy Park and actually thank us for enforcing the 9 o'clock curfew, because now they can say, well, I can tell my kids they have to be home when the park closes. And they're using that as a kind of a tool to get the kids home. And what we've been doing is, okay, 9 o'clock, telling them the park's closing now, we'll give you 15 more minutes. And as we've been doing this about a week now, that the kids are actually policing themselves, realizing, okay, it's getting time, we got to get out of here as it gets closer to 9:30.
Great, thank you for that.
Chief. Councilor Pettingill.
I just wanted to say that even though I will be supporting this, I do agree with Councilor Beam that 10 o'clock perhaps is too late, and we should be getting these kids home. So, I fully support coming back to this at a later point.
Public?
Hi, George Hamilton again from Ash Street. Just a thought and maybe a consideration for your future meeting a couple of months down the road. I personally think this is the best option right now for the situation. But in other cities and other parks that I've worked through, there have been opportunities to pull a permit, possibly for evening games or supervised events. And I'd like you to consider keeping that as a future option, kind of something, a light at the end of the tunnel. And also a level of community empowerment, say through Big Brothers Big Sisters or whatnot. If an adult represents a group of teenagers or children, that they might pull a permit to use the gazebo for music or the basketball courts or the skate, etc.
Just to clarify, there is a provision in the ordinance that says the park closes at between 10 p.m. and 5 p.m. except under certain circumstances, including participation in a program or activity sponsored or authorized by the city. So if somebody wanted to have an event in the park, they could come in, get a permit for that, and get a permission to stay beyond 10.
Thank you. Melissa?
Sorry, I'm chewing gum. My name is Melissa Dunn. I'm a resident of Lewiston at 254 Blake Street and a community organizer. In my other 3 jobs as a relief staff with New Beginnings, they say 2 out of 5 teens are homeless in Maine. Or is it 2 out of 5? You might know. That's huge. It's a huge number. And so, kids go where they go for survival, maybe it's playing basketball. Maybe they have to leave where they were spending the night because it became unsafe and they have to walk through the park and there's a shortcut. I just worry that we are equating crime to poverty and poverty to crime, when crime happens in the suburbs all the time. I also would ask folks to think about what's equal and what's unequal. I oppose strongly cameras in the downtown. The excuse that I'm given is that the station doesn't it doesn't travel that far in the suburbs. But until we could get cameras in the downtown, or until there's a curfew in other parks in Lewiston, why is it just Kennedy Park, other than what's transpired? You know what I mean? So we got to think about equalness. We are in a demographic, we're the most poverty-stricken area in New England, north of Boston. It doesn't make sense for me to uphold classist and racist policies or ordinances that disproportionately affect poor folks and there's no equal around the whole city of Lewiston. So I'd ask people to consider that, and maybe to have actual conversations with downtown folks about solutions, not just to address violence and things like that, but about the park. We have to include people in these conversations, and sometimes it's meeting people right where they're at. It doesn't take long, and you'll get valuable information. People out there have really great ideas. Thanks.
Just to clarify, the curfew does apply citywide, and the park closure is 9 p.m. elsewhere in the city, through all the city parks.
I will just add, yes, that every other park in the city is 9 o'clock, so we would be actually extending the one downtown due to the large number of kids that utilize it by an extra hour.
Thanks, Chief. Councilor Beam.
I'm glad you brought that up, Miss Melissa, because I would never want to put in something that didn't include everybody in the city. And I have to say, when I spoke about a curfew, I was thinking citywide curfew. I don't know where you are, Melissa. But I'm speaking to everyone, but especially, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I want people to know that I don't think we should just establish a curfew for Kennedy. And again, the chief said, well, that's true of all parks, but perhaps it should be true of children just wandering around the streets of Lewiston anywhere. And that's what I meant when I said that. And I looked back at this and said, oh yeah, it just includes, this ordinance is just Kennedy Park. And I think we need to do something about that. Perhaps that's something we should address, make sure we address when we all get together and talk about tweaking this.
To the public. Were we at the public? I don't even know where we are. Okay, public. Still at the public. Okay. My senior moment. All right, back to the council.
You're not going to tell everyone your age?
39. No 4 yet. Call the roll.
Councilor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 7-0. Requested action number 2 for this item, to waive Section 7C of the rules governing the city council and to allow for final reading at this time.
So moved.
Second.
And does this require 5 votes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions on the council? Public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Sorry.
Oh,
So can we just get some clarification, because I guess I'm not clear. So the curfew in Kennedy Park will be 10 p.m. The curfew in all other parks is 9 p.m.
Yes, we're not changing
Correct.
the other curfews.
And we're going to deal with this for a couple of months, see how this works out, and then bring it back to the
Well,
council. with
right
a-
now, the curfew at Kennedy Park from Chestnut Street towards Spruce, where we have the basketball court, is right now is 9 o'clock. So I'm asking you to expand that to 10, but also part of the park where the gazebo is 1 o'clock.
Right.
So basically, you could run from the police from the 9 o'clock zone to the 1 o'clock zone, and then say, okay, I'm over on the 1 o'clock side. So I'd like to have the whole park be 10 o'clock. So I'm actually increasing the current curfew for what the area that the kids actually use.
And then in terms of the curfew that is citywide for underage kids, that is what time?
That is 10 o'clock,
Okay.
10
So we-
o'clock, 10 o'clock weeknights, 12:01
Friday and Saturday.
a.m. Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
And what's the age?
Under 17 and below.
So we actually have those things in place.
Yes, we do.
I just want to be clear about that.
Yes, we do.
okay. Call the roll.
Councilor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0. Third item for requested action for this item, that the proposed amendments to the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 54, Parks and Recreation, regarding the change in time for the closure of Kennedy Park from 1 a.m. to 10 p.m., receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Any more discussion on the council? Public? Back to the council.
Councilor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 4B.
Item number 4B, public hearing and first passage regarding an amendment to the Parks and Recreation Ordinance to establish a standardized time for 10 p.m. for the closure of Kennedy Park. Requested action that the proposed amendments to the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 54, Parks and Recreation, regarding the change in time from the closure of Kennedy Park from 1 a.m. to 10 p.m. receive first passage by a roll call vote, and to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Cloutier. Any discussion on the council? Public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing and first passage to contractually rezone the property at 163 Bates Street from the Centerville District to the Downtown Residential District. Requested action to approve first passage for the amendment to the zoning and land use code and map to contractually rezone the property at 163 Bates Street from the Centerville District to the Downtown Residential District, subject to a contractual agreement.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Ray. Any discussion on the council? Counselor Marcotte?
I'd like to say that I attended the planning board meeting the other night with regards to this, originally with the intent to oppose the idea. However, during the discussion and an eventual unanimous vote, I see some value here. But at this time, I'd like to say that I'm not happy with the fact that the property owner got misinformation from staff. It's not the first time this year, and I hope it's the last time, because I don't like being backed up and put into a position having to support something just to Band-Aid something where a property owner was misled, even though it was unintentional. So I will be supporting this tonight.
And Counselor Marcotte? Counselor Cludier?
Can we just get a explanation of this from Dave, maybe?
Sure. So we've been working with the owner, Advanced Heating Solutions, Rick LaChapelle, to submit this petition to contractually zone the property to Centerville. He did buy this property with guidance from the city to convert it into a lodging house. It wasn't until after he actually pulled the permits that it came to our attention that lodging houses weren't allowed in the underlying zoning district. So the solution we saw to that was to propose a contract zone. We worked with Advanced Heating Solutions to come up with that language. He's basically directly across the street from an existing DR zone now that allows lodging houses. The building did have 11 units in it. He's proposing to do 36 units in it. Basically, the zone will continue to allow whatever is allowed today in that underlying zoning district, with the exception of adding lodging houses to it. As Councilor Marcotte indicated, the planning board voted unanimously in support.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Questions from the council for David while he's still there? Thank you. Okay. From the public.
Good evening. My name is Rick LaChapelle from AHS. First and foremost, I wanted to wonder where everybody went. I thought they were all here in support of my project. I know I can get a little rowdy. I didn't expect a police presence with my project coming forward, so thank you, Chief, for having everybody here. Sorry, I had to after this.
I offered to move you up on the agenda. Just
Thank you. We're pretty excited about the program. We currently have a few rooming houses right now, and we've seen in the city of Lewiston there's still a need for it. Seems to be the natural progression when somebody's really in need. They're on the street. We heard about homeless people. The next progression seems to be the shelters, and then we see the natural progression. They go to a boarding house, and then they get into an efficiency apartment, and we see them getting better as they move forward. We've made a concerted effort to make our buildings clean, neat. We work hand in hand with law enforcement, with code enforcement. We're taking a building that is not to standard right now. We're putting all new electrical, all new plumbing, sprinkler system into it. We're investing, besides the cost of the building, we're putting another $300,000 into the building to make it a nicer place. We have laundry services inside. So we're really stepping up, and I think it's helpful. There is a need. With our other five buildings right now, we're running at about a 99% occupancy. The turnover is fairly quickly, but there is a need within our community. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
questions for Rick while he's here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the council. And call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, agenda item number 6.
Item number 6, condemnation hearing for the building located at 12 Fair Street. There are 2 items for requested action. The first item, to conduct a hearing to determine if the building located at 12 Fair Street has met the dangerous building statutes as defined in Title 17, Section 2851 et al.
So moved.
All right. Second. Motion by Counselor Ray, or seconded by Counselor LaJoy. All right. We're meeting this evening to conduct a hearing to determine whether the structure at 12 Fair Street is a nuisance or dangerous building within the meaning of the applicable Maine statute found in 17 MRS 2851 and succeeding statutes. If we determine that the structure is a nuisance or dangerous building, we will then determine what actions the property owners must take. Under 17 MRS 2851, a structure or any part thereof is a nuisance or dangerous building if it is structurally unsafe, unstable, unsanitary, constitutes a fire hazard, is unsuitable or improper for the use or occupancy to which it is put, constitutes a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, obsolescence, abandonment, or is otherwise dangerous to life or property. This is the standard that we will use to decide whether the structure is a nuisance or dangerous building. Before we start, I first have a question for all City Council members. 12 Fair Street is owned by Eric Smith and Tracy Smith. Do any City Council members know the property owners have knowledge about this matter? It means you could not fairly and impartially hear the facts and decide the matter based on the evidence presented at this hearing. Next, I ask that any representative or representatives for 12 Fair Street or party in interest who is present tonight might introduce yourself, including identifying your name, address, and position. Now the
The podium, sorry.
Podium.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is David West. I'm with the law firm of Dwayne Morris. We are located at 2 Monument Square in Portland, Maine. And I am here representing Aquin Loan Servicing, excuse me.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay. Are you representing the mortgage holder, David?
Yes.
You are
the
representing...
The loan servicer. They're servicing the mortgage.
Are you representing the mortgage holder?
No, I believe Wells Fargo is the mortgage holder, and Aquin Loan Servicing is servicing the mortgage for Wells Fargo. So they're the day-to-day activity.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Yep.
Now, the procedures that the City Council will follow in conducting this hearing are as follows. Any documents to be used in this proceeding will be marked as an Exhibit 1. Accept into evidence the Planning and Code Enforcement Department's previously provided Exhibits A1 for A12, or for 12 Fair Street. 2, presentation of evidence for the property will occur in the following order. The City Planning and Code Department will present an opening statement, relevant evidence regarding why they believe the structure at issue is a nuisance or dangerous building, and what remedies the City Council shall order. Following the completion of Planning and Code Enforcement Department's presentation, any opposing party will have an opportunity to present an opening statement and any relevant evidence they want the City Council to consider with regard to whether the structure at issue is a nuisance or dangerous building. If so, what remedy the Council shall order. The Planning and Code Department can then ask questions of any opposing party and witnesses they present. Any opposing party can then ask questions of Planning and Code Enforcement and any witnesses. The Planning and Code Department can make additional comments regarding any opposing party's presentation. Any opposing party can then make additional comments regarding the presentation of Planning and Code Enforcement. City Council members can then ask questions of Planning and Code Enforcement, an opposing party, or witness. Each side can then make closing remarks of not more than 2 minutes each. Only parties to these hearings will be allowed to participate. Comments from the public will not be taken at this hearing. After all information has been presented, the record will be closed and the City Council will deliberate and take a vote on whether the structure in question is a nuisance or dangerous building. If the council determines that the structure is a nuisance or dangerous building, it shall deliberate and take a vote on the appropriate order to be made to remedy the situation. This is an administrative hearing and not a court proceeding or trial. Therefore, the formal rules of evidence will not apply. As mayor, I will determine the appropriateness and admissibility of evidence on advice of the city attorney. Now I ask that the Lewiston Planning and Code Enforcement Department please present the City Council with information relevant to the matter before it.
Thank you, Mayor. David Hediger, Director of Planning and Code Enforcement. 12 Fair Street is a vacant single-family dwelling owned by Eric Smith and Tracy Smith by virtue of a deed dated December 22nd, 2006. The deed to Eric Smith and Tracy Smith is in your packets as Exhibit A. The following entities have mortgages on the property: Wells Fargo Bank N.A. as trustee for Option 1 Mortgage Loan Trust, 2007-2 Asset Bank Certificates, Series 2007-2, and Aquin Financial Corporation. On May 23, 2018, a notice of this hearing was recorded in the Androscoggin County Registry of Deeds in Book 9844, page 35, a copy of which is included in your packets as Exhibit B. On May 29, 2018, Tracy Smith was served with a notice of hearing and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit C. On May 29, 2018, Eric Smith was served with a notice of hearing and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit D. On May 25, 2018, Wells Fargo was served with a notice of hearing and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit E. On May 25, 2018, Aquin was served with a notice of hearing and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit F.
Good evening, Council. My name is Thomas Maynard of the City of Lewiston's Building Inspector and Code Enforcement Officer. My qualifications are in your packets. Correspondence with the owner and tenants. On March of 2008, the water service was disconnected for failure to pay, indicating the building and its renovation project was abandoned before that date. See the Division of Water and Sewer Service order request located in your packets as Exhibit H. From 2008 to 2017, retired Code Enforcement Officer Jeff Burrill received numerous calls from officers with the City of Lewiston's Police Department regarding the building's condition and it being unsecured due to complaints made to the Police Department. On February 23, 2018, I issued a notice of condemnation to the owners of record, Eric Smith and Tracy Smith of 1480 Street, Phoenix City, Alabama, and a party of interest, Wells Fargo Bank N.A., ordering the building's renovation and repairs or its demolition by no later than March 23, 2018. The owner of the structure was notified and the building was posted. On May 30, 2018, Eric Smith called then Director of Planning and Code Enforcement, Gil Arsenault, to argue that he gave 12 Fair back to the lender. However, there is no deed recorded in the Androscoggin Registry of Deeds to show that. Further, water and sewer bills continue to show Eric Smith and Tracy Smith as the owners, and the payment on those bills are current. Present conditions of 12th Street, as per the slideshow. 12th Fair Street, photos taken June 6, 2011, February 22, 2018. Photo number 1 on April 25, 2018. Front view of the building showing broken glass in the front door. It is abandoned, created a hazard to health and safety. Photo number 2 shows a deteriorated soffit and siding in need of repairs and paint, a result of inadequate maintenance. Photo number 3 shows damage and deterioration to the block foundation wall, making for instability in the foundation system. Also note the deteriorated paint. Photo number 4 shows the interior view of the deteriorated, damaged foundation wall, allowing for the entry of moisture. Photo number 5 shows an open set of stairs to the floor, making for hazardous conditions. Somebody breaks in there in the middle of the night with no lights, they can fall through that and be severely injured or killed. Photo number 6 shows the exposed paper-based insulation and combustible materials constituting an increased risk of fire. Photo number 7 shows additional exposed combustible materials. Photo number 8 shows another example of an abandoned construction project leaving combustible materials exposed, making for increased fire loading and accelerated spread of fire. Photo number 9 shows an example of severely deteriorated paint as a result of failure to maintain. Photo number 10 shows the removed ceiling due to the abandoned construction project, leaving combustible materials exposed and open through fire-rated assemblies, facilitating the accelerated spread of fire. Photo number 11 shows the abandoned construction project leaving the toilet flange connection open, allowing for the entry of sewer gases, making for unsanitary conditions. Photo number 12 shows an example of incomplete and exposed number 14 gauge wiring. Number 13 shows another example of an abandoned construction project leaving exposed materials, making for increased fire loading and accelerated spread of fire. Photo number 14 shows, yet again, another example of the abandoned construction project leaving exposed paper face insulation, increasing the risk of accelerated spread of fire. Photo number 15 shows another bathroom in the state of demolition, leaving an open sewer line due to the removal of the toilet, creating hazardous conditions. Observe the toilet in the tub. Photo number 16 shows the remnants of an oil spill due to damage to the oil tank line, creating hazardous and unsanitary conditions. Also observe the electrical wiring not supported in accordance with code, creating hazardous conditions if re-energized. Photo number 17 shows an accumulation of combustible materials contributing to fire loading, making for hazardous conditions. Photo number 18, another view of damaged electrical wiring and conduit, creating hazardous conditions. Photo number 19 shows severely deteriorated and damaged soffit siding and trim due to the lack of maintenance. Photo number 20 shows the excessive debris about the property, creating hazardous conditions. Conclusions. 12 Fair Street qualifies as a dangerous building for the following reasons. The structure's foundation is moving laterally and unstable. The building's staircase to the basement is open, presenting an immediate threat to safety due to the lack of guardrails. And a complete renovation has left combustible material exposed, creating conditions that greatly increase the threat of the spread of fire. As a result, any fire would move much more quickly and compromise structural components, increasing the acceleration of fire and hastening subsequent collapse, making it very dangerous for firefighters if they were to make entry. The accumulation of personal property and debris causes fire loading and presents dangerous conditions. The condition of the interior and exterior painted surface present exposure to the hazards of lead paint. The open drainage system allows for the entry of sewer gases, presenting unsanitary and hazardous conditions. The incomplete installation of exposed electrical conductors creates the risk of fire and dangerous conditions if they were to be re-energized. The fuel storage tank has leaks, creating an environmental hazard and a potential for accelerated fire if you had a hot fire burning there. The excessive debris in the property outside the structure creates hazardous conditions. The structure constitutes a health or safety, a threat to a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, and obsolescence. As such, we ask that you adopt our proposed findings of fact and conclusion of law in order that the structure be demolished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Mr. West, this is your opportunity to make an opening statement.
Sure. So I just basically want you to sort of understand the bank's position right now. We don't own the property. The mortgage that's on the property is in default, but the bank is actually precluded from proceeding with a foreclosure. There's a federal statute called the Service Member Civil Relief Act, which protects active duty military members from foreclosure proceedings. Both the owners of the property, I am almost positive, are in the military. I have you can do an online search, and I have one that my client provided me from February confirming that both Eric and Tracy Smith are currently active members. So that's the reason the bank isn't able to foreclose, obtain ownership of the property, and go in and fix it. If they could, they would. And at this point, what the bank wants to do is gather all the facts, determine if there's equity in the property that would make it worth it for them to fix all the issues that were just laid out, and make it compliant with all the particular codes. And yeah, so at this point, the bank is just asking for some time to make that evaluation and determine whether they do want to go in and fix it or whether they want to allow the property to be demolished.
Do you have a timeline from the bank on what they'd be looking for?
So I think their next step for the bank would be to, they're working on getting an appraisal. They are working with a contractor right now who's here with me today, who's confirmed that the property has been secured. There's a lockbox on it, and the windows, from what I can tell, have been either boarded or otherwise secured. In terms of a timeline, I would say the bank would know within 60 days whether or not they want to proceed with making the repairs or whether they would basically walk away from the property.
Okay. Would the contractor like to speak to the condition of the property or any evidence?
Sure. I'm Sean Minahan. I live at 375 Davis Road in Durham. I am representing Bill at Innovative out in New York. We did a lot of property preservation there. We haven't done any construction, as he said, because the bank doesn't have possession, but we've tried to maintain the property to the best. And we got a file, we can show you what we've done. I don't know what else I can tell you. I think all the conditions that he has and he's showing are true, but I think our hands are tied at this point in time, and so is in the bank. So I think if they can get the time, they'll be able to go forward, if they choose.
Okay, thank you. It's time for planning and code, and ask questions of the opposing party, the contractor.
I don't know that we have any questions other than the time involved with respect to the 60 days necessary. Certainly, as the council knows, we're not necessarily interested in demolishing buildings if we don't have to. If someone's willing to put the time, money, and effort into it to save a structure, then that's the ultimate goal here. At the same time, we need to see movement made on these types of properties here. So, you know, given the service that's going to be involved here and the time that's going to take, I would like to think that's going to give the contractor and the bank adequate time to decide whether or not they can actually move forward with this or not.
Is it code's position that this property would be a candidate for rehabilitation in its current state?
I think it could be. Normally what we do is we'll require a plan of action from them with their resources, financial resources and capacity, submitted to us in writing. They'll have a phase schedule of the corrections that they would make, probably would consult me as well as to those corrections to the foundation and some of the other structural elements that are in distress. You know, we've done this before. Sometimes it just takes this kind of an action to make things start to happen. Another thing that they could do is they could quickly liquidate it, and we could move on to somebody else to maybe work on it, but we'd have that person tied up as well as like we did on another project that we did.
To Tom's point about the financial capacity, that's key with us because we don't want to get burned on somebody who thinks that they can make this happen and then they don't have the capacity.
Okay. This is the opportunity for any opposing party if you would like to ask questions of code enforcement. Mr. West?
I don't really have any questions. If the bank was given time, you know, we would certainly love, I mean, I've spoken with the city attorney, and I'd be happy to work with the inspector to lay out that plan of action in writing. But again, the bank doesn't own the property, so it's certainly, that is one of the other factors that the bank would look at, you know, if they're given that time to decide whether or not they want to fix up the property. They would determine the risk in doing that without actually owning the property. But other than that, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, given that the parties in interest have indicated they've already tried to give the property back to the bank, has the bank reached out to them since they became aware of this? Has there been any effort to contact them to clear that up?
I'm not sure of that. I don't know the answer to that. That would probably be one of the first things I do, is to reach out to them to see what they understand their position to be. I'm not even sure if they're aware that they still own the property. I don't know, and I'm not sure if they're aware that they're protected by the Service Member Civil Relief Act as well.
Under the circumstances and the conversations had with Gil Arsenault, I would pretty easily assume that the owners are aware of every one of these aspects. I think that their desire, based on the things that they've said, is to wash their hands of it. I don't have that as fact, but if there was a way to get them to sign off of a quick claim deed and move this forward more quickly, I think that's something that they could be approached about. However, if the bank wanted to make the renovations to it, we do have a shortage of single-family dwellings in the city. There is certainly a need, but I think they'd be in pretty deep once they made the repairs to it. They wouldn't recover all of their money. It's my opinion, having been exposed to the properties.
Okay, you're all set.
Yep, thank
Do
you.
you have a final comment on that point, Mr. West?
Yes, that is something we could do, is we could reach out to the borrowers to see if they're interested in a deed in lieu or something like that, in lieu of the foreclosure. Again, the bank, it does want to determine whether or not they would want to proceed with having the property deeded to them and making all the necessary repairs before they do that.
Would the bank release the property if they make the determination they don't want to proceed?
I would have to check. In my experience, that is what what banks I've worked for in the past would do. But I would want to get confirmation before I say that, yes, that's what they would do. And I'm happy to work with the city attorney to get that information.
Okay, so the benefit of the council, in light of the bank and the representation, and the thoughts of planning and code enforcement, my sidebar with our city attorney here would be recommending to postpone this hearing for 90 days and give them time to work through the process, obtain the property, and present an action plan to planning and code enforcement. The 90 days is arbitrary. We can make it 30, we can make it 60. Just time to go through the process. That's the recommendation from the city attorney.
We still could have a decision and a vote on it for the demolition, give them that time, and not have to revisit this here again, if that would be easier.
I'll open to council. If anyone has any. That's Councilor Marco.
If I understand Mr. Maynard correctly, we would vote to condemn?
Demolish.
Order the demolition.
Order the demolition?
And you can set it at 60 days. The bank can make a determination. We have gotten orders before and still worked with parties to rehabilitate the property. But we still have the option to pull the trigger at any time if somebody fails to perform and not leave this go through the winter.
So we could retract that if we hear back favorably within 60 days?
Yes, we've done that before. Counsel could be, Attorney Mike Carey could probably tell us a little better about that, how that process would go, but we have done exactly that in the past.
What do you want to speak?
It seems to me it's much simpler to just postpone the hearing, because in those other instances, we've been dealing with individual owners, not banks. In my view, if a bank has this hanging over them, they're not going to be sure if code could at any point pull the plug on it. Well, we don't like your plan, you're not investing enough money, they could pull a plug on it, and the bank would be left out. So I would just recommend, I think it's neater and cleaner to just continue the hearing for 60 or 90 days.
Councilor LaJoy, you had a comment first.
Yeah, the only thing that I had is if we postpone, we'll say I'll just use arbitrary 60 days. Is there a mechanism by which you can safeguard the building for intrusion?
So I believe that there's currently a lockbox on the property, and are the windows secured?
It was, and then it was broken into again, but since it's been posted, we haven't done it.
Okay.
We want to go past our range. I know the debris.
You just go up to the podium for the benefit of the public, sir. Thank you, Sean.
I know since we've been in, the code officer shows photos down the basement, down by the tank. That's all been cleaned out. We put handrails on the back deck, the side deck, not the back, because from what I understand, that's not even up to code. So what we need is, we need access, we need to have the right to go in and do whatever additional work, like boarding up windows, so on and so forth. The front door seems to be broken, one pane. The second pane is not broken, it's double glass. So, you know, whatever the officer wants me to do, we could do.
My order allows authorized individuals, such as those with the bank, to make entry to take care of business as they see fit in order to maintain the asset if so, or to keep it safe.
Okay. Yep.
That satisfy your question?
Yes, yeah, I was just worried about entry and potential damage and/or other.
We try to stay on top of that, but, you know, it's a cycle for us. I get my orders from New York. Bill gets his from the bank. It's just a process. It's nothing that we get to choose. We don't get to go out and do repairs without a written order.
Councilor Lyson?
Yes, thank you. You know, one of the things I heard over and over again is that the beginning of renovations has caused a lot of the problems about the fire, right? You leave, and, I mean, you could go into any renovation project at any moment and say, you're increasing the combustion, whatever. I mean, that's part of the process. I mean, you expose, you put in whatever. So, and, you know, I think this is a, you know, I think the case was made about needing single-family homes in the community. I think this is one we shouldn't give up on that quickly. And in knowing that neighborhood, as long as the building's secured and we have a pretty guaranteed tight, and I don't think we need to go over 60 days. I think that should be enough for the bank to really decide. So I would be willing to extend it 60 days, the hearing itself.
Just for the council, that there have been several properties that, about that time, 2007, that they abandoned projects thinking that they would be able to flip the house, and the market fell out. So, and working with people to do that is what we'll do if need be, to rehabilitate that building.
Councilor Cloutier?
I would just second Councilor Lyson.
Do we have an actual motion, or?
The motion should be to continue the public hearing to the council meeting of September 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
4th, excuse me.
4th. Pick a day. 4th.
4th.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone this hearing, or continue this hearing, until September 4th, made by Councilor Lyson and seconded by Councilor Cloutier. And now we will bring that motion to the council. Councilor Markov.
I think I'm going to oppose that motion, because what I think I just heard is that if we did actually approve the condemnation, it would give the authority to the city of Lewiston to allow access to the premise. Correct?
No, they still have authority to get in for authorized individuals, and that's per my order. They have a party of interest, and that's explicitly detailed in the condemnation order. If you gave the order for demolition, even if you gave it 90 days, we still could work with them to come up with a plan and make repairs, or continue it for 90 days and come back and issue the order.
But we're not issuing an order, we're simply postponing the agenda item, correct? With the current
Yeah.
motion. That's why I would prefer the order of condemnation and have the 60-day window, and we can pull that back. And hearing September 4th, that's more like 75 days, I would think. I would want to make sure that this building is dealt with in this calendar year, if nothing is going to be done to bring it back to life.
Councilor Cloutier?
So, just to clarify his question, I think he's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's asking, and what I'm understanding is that under both of those circumstances, they are still able to gain access to the building?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Irrespective. 90 days could push things a bit if we had to come back, and then once we come back again, there's a 30-day period, appeal period, before we could even start the bidding for demolition, so we could be looking November, December.
The only concern that the order says they have 30 days. So if you pass the order, by council order, within 30 days, the building would have to be demolished, or we could go in and demolish it. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't delay demolishing it. But my concern is always, when you're dealing with banks, that if they have something hanging over their head, that might not work out for them. They might just not walk away right then and not bother following through on it because of the potential downside that they'll be making investments and have those investments yanked out from under them.
Councilor Ray?
So to clarify, when you're saying your current order, Tom, you're meaning your order of condemnation,
Yes.
which was served in February. So
Mhm.
what are the terms of that? Is that in our packet? Sorry.
Yes, it's to either
Where in
repair.
our packet is it?
Pardon me?
Where in the packet is it?
It would have been exhibit, Mike's got it right there, okay.
Sorry.
Gee.
It might be in our,
Uh-huh.
I'm looking for it.
It's in H.
H.
H?
Is it?
Notice?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the building has already been condemned, and I'm just going to quickly read what it says in here. So does this have a timeline on it? That's what I'm not seeing.
March 23rd.
Thank you. Okay. And so the current order is to extend this hearing, not to extend the order of condemnation. Would we have to do that separately?
It's to extend the hearing.
It's to postpone the hearing.
Okay.
That's current motion on the floor.
And so does the order of condemnation then automatically extend as well? So that people have access to the building in the way that you're saying they currently do?
Well, if I were to file a case under Rule 80K, we would go back to the deadline as stipulated on my notice of condemnation. This is something that's more involved, what we're doing tonight, that takes a more severe action. And that's what the decision is whether to issue the demolition order, which we would execute if we didn't get compliance, or to postpone the meeting to another time and then issue that order.
The order of condemnation remains in effect regardless of the deadline.
Okay.
Exactly.
Deadline is just, once that deadline hits, we can take legal action in an 80K court case against the owner. So it doesn't affect the order of condemnation. It's just a question of if and when we get to the point of going to court, the actual offense and fine would kick in on the date they had to rectify by.
Thank you. That's more clear.
To also clarify further, the notice of demolition that we do under the Maine Dangerous Buildings Act allows for a special tax to be assessed once we have torn the building down, or to pay for all the fees. And either the bank would pay that, which many have done, or we lien the property and as a priority lien or a tax lien.
Okay.
A Rule 80K case doesn't do the same thing.
And just be aware, and this is one of those cases where I would anticipate we would be unlikely to recover much in the way of the special tax. At some point, the taxes would mature. The bank obviously is going to say it doesn't own the property. The owners say they don't want to have anything to do with it. So eventually, 18, 24 months from now, we'll get the property. We won't have a clean title because we've taken it through a tax lien, so the value of the property will be minimal. So if we can preserve the property in one way, shape, or form or other, it's much preferable.
Okay. We're good on the council? Call the roll.
So just for, sorry.
Can you just clarify
Yes,
what we're...
so clarification, so the motion before you is to continue the hearing to the September 4th City Council meeting.
Thank you.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
No.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
No.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 5 to 2.
We had something.
Okay, we have made it to agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, resolve establishing an ad hoc advisory committee on rental registration. Requested action to approve the resolve establishing an ad hoc advisory committee on rental registration.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Discussion on the council. Councilor Cloutier?
So there are just two spots in here where we make reference to the Lewiston Auburn Public Health Committee, and I want to make sure that we're clear that Auburn is not a part of that. So in the information section, it says Lewiston Auburn Area Public Health Committee. It should just be Lewiston Area Public Health Committee.
That's correct.
And then on the third page in our packet, which is part of the council resolve, it makes reference under number 3G to a representative of the Lewiston Auburn Public Health Committee, and that should be corrected to Lewiston Area Public Health Committee.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further comment, questions from the council? The public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 9.
Item number 9, resolve adopting city council goals and priorities for 2018 and 2019. Requested action to approve the resolve adopting council goals and priorities for 2018-2019.
So moved.
Second.
Agenda, no. Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Discussion on the council. Public. Back to the council. Councilor Ray.
Just for the benefit of the public, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on public comment tonight, and I think a lot of the solutions or possible solutions that were mentioned during public comment are attempted to be addressed in these goals and priorities. So I'm super glad we have them and excited to vote for them and glad we developed them as an entire council. So I just wanted to say that.
Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, resolve accepting a public easement for a portion of the unaccepted portion of Cody Street. Requested action to approve the resolve accepting a public easement for a portion of the unaccepted portion of Cody Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. For some reason I put Marcotte. Comments from the council? Public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0. And I will point out that we have an order that needs to be signed tonight, so we can file it at the registry, so I'll start to pass it around during the next item. Thank you. Item number 11, resolve authorizing an exemption from the city's purchasing policy regarding the composition of the selection committee to review proposals for architectural services for a fire substation. Requested action to approve the resolve authorizing an exemption from the city's purchasing policy regarding the composition of the selection committee to review proposals for architectural services for a fire substation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Marcotte. Discussion on the council? The public? Back to the council? Just for benefit of everybody, I do need to put a counselor on that committee, and I think Councilor LaJoy, former firefighter, might be, I don't know, kind of the slam dunk for that one.
We were kind of anticipating that might be the case.
All right. You good with that, Mike?
I'm good with it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, call the roll.
Council from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Everybody likes you.
Yeah, there we go.
Agenda item number 12.
Item number 12, authorization to accept transfer of forfeiture funds. Requested action that pursuant to Title 15, Maine Revised Statutes Annotated, Section 5824.3 and Section 5822.4a, the City Council hereby acknowledges and approves of the transfer of $1,431 or any portion thereof in the case of the State of Maine versus Omar, court records being funds forfeited pursuant to the court process. It is further acknowledged that these funds shall be credited to the City of Lewiston Drug Enforcement Program account.
So moved. Ooh. Second.
Yeah, Councilor Marcotte, Councilor Ray. Questions from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 13.
Item number 13, appointment to the Lewiston Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Requested action to confirm the mayor's nomination and to appoint the following resident as a member of the Board of Commissioners to the Lewiston Housing Authority. Emily Darby, 157 Farwell Street, term to expire September 17th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Discussion from council. Public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
I'd like to move to suspend the rules to consider the resolve on cameras. Is that helpful?
That works.
Second. Did we get it?
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Lyson, authorizing an exemption in the city's purchasing policy. Actually, this is just to suspend the rules first. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And 5 votes also. Suspension of the rules, no discussion. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0. So the motion before you that you're being asked to approve or review under other business is a resolve authorizing an exemption from the city's purchasing policy for the emergency purchase of certain camera equipment for Kennedy Park.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Lyson. Questions from the council? Counselor Cludier?
Can we just get an overview from you, Ed, on sort of what this entails?
Sure, there's going to be a couple of things done. One is that we will be replacing and upgrading some of our cameras, in particular to install some that operate better in low lighting conditions, get a better quality picture. We will also be adding, I don't know the exact number, but several cameras to give better coverage in the park.
And can you just give an overview of where the money's coming from?
Yes, the money is coming from the last year's LCIP approved $150,000 in bonds for the purpose of upgrading citywide camera system. So we have not really gotten to do that project yet or to begin the whole project, but this will allow us to speed up this immediate element of the project. So we'll be using already approved bond funds.
So just to be clear, it was something that was already on the books to be done. We're just doing it sooner than we had anticipated.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Okay. To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Ward 7?
7. Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Reports and updates. Counselor Ray?
From the school committee, we will be meeting next Monday, and we will be having a facilities subcommittee meeting before the meeting at 5 o'clock at the Dingley Building, and then we will be, I think this is our last meeting before we're adjourning for the summer, and we'll have less frequent meetings. So if you got business, bring it to us.
Thank you. Any other reports, updates? Other business counselors may have. Counselor Lyson.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss real estate negotiations of which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
All in favor? All right.